number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, April 22nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, -2 degrees. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The Premier is set to make his first public appearance in some 5 full days this morning. With details, here's City News reporter Kevin Meisner.
Premier Doug Ford is isolating at his late mother's home. He's been set up with internet and a laptop. He plans to hold a news conference over Zoom at 9:45 this morning. His announcement last Friday that playgrounds would be shut down and police could make random stops in Ontario was a massive hit to his overall approval ratings. A poll by Innovative Research Group shows it triggered a 6-point drop in support, with only 30% of Ontario residents now saying they approve of the Ford government's handling of the pandemic. Government House Leader Paul Calandra says he still has faith in Doug Ford.
These are very challenging times that require governments to move quickly, and there is no playbook for this. But we are doing the best that we can to address the needs of the people of the province of Ontario and Canadians as a whole.
The poll also shows that Premier Doug Ford's popularity is in free fall. It stood at 32% before Friday's announcement, now down to 24%. Another survey by Abacus Data finds only 28% of people have a positive view of Ford, and that's down 11 points in the last week alone. Last summer, the Ford government had an approval rating of 60%. I'm Kevin Meisner.
City News Time, 9:01. Now the forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
It's a mainly cloudy, windy day for Ottawa, the Valley, and Smiths Falls. The wind out of the west-northwest will climb to 7 for the high today. Continuing windy tonight, partly cloudy and +1. And tomorrow, sun and cloud and 15. For today, the high 7.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's -2 degrees. Ottawa's top doctor is breaking down why she and the City Board of Health want to see a smaller list of essential businesses. Medical Officer of Health Dr. Vera Etches says there are still rising rates of COVID-19 in the province, and that leads to pressures which cannot be sustained. She is going to be interviewed with Rob Snow coming up shortly, and she says outbreaks continue to grow in numbers.
So, this is about really looking at the places that pose risk and which of those are essential.
Now, the doctor is still not planning on issuing a Section 22 order that would close workplaces with 5 or more cases, since Ottawa has the capacity to manage the outbreaks. However, she adds the capital's COVID situation is being reevaluated every day. And the full interview with Dr. Etches coming up on the Rob Snow Show this morning in about a half an hour's time. The Prime Minister is raising Canada's climate target for 2030. The new target announced this morning to reduce emissions 40 to 45% below the levels they were in 2005. He unveiled the targets during a virtual address to world leaders convened by the American President Joe Biden for a summit on fighting climate change. Biden and his Vice President Kamala Harris opened that event. City News Time, 9:03. Gatineau police reissuing an appeal to help find a missing teen. 17-year-old Madison Teal has not been seen since January 23rd at about 6:30 in the evening. She is described as 5'5", weighing about 120 pounds and white. Police believe she could be in Ontario. Also, a missing 13-year-old boy in Ottawa. Police service looking for help locating Mukunde Wadandi. He was last seen leaving his house in Vanier yesterday about 3:30 in the afternoon. Police do not have a description of the clothing that he was wearing, but any information, you're asked to call them. We do have his picture up at our website. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Inform your opinions.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Happy Earth Day. Happy Earth Day. Mr. Trudeau will celebrate Earth Day taking part in a virtual global climate summit hosted by the American President, Mr. Biden. The Trudeau government will then announce new climate targets. And then 9 years from now, there'll probably be a news story about how the Canadian government missed its climate targets, because that's the Canadian way. great at setting targets, even better at missing them. And don't worry about that snow today. And happy Earth Day. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show here on City News. Oh, what a show we have for you today. Dr. Vera Etches back on the program this morning, Ottawa's Chief Medical Officer of Health. I spoke with her this morning. We covered a lot of ground. From closing even more businesses to the shutdown of the golf courses, the local vaccination program, police patrolling traffic between Gatineau and Ottawa. It was a lengthy conversation, and we'll bring it to you in its entirety starting at 9:30 this morning. Just before that, though, Randall Denley will join us. Randall's on the show every Thursday morning, author, post-media columnist. He writes a lot about the Ford government, so we'll get into Doug Ford's really bad week. As I told you earlier this week, at the beginning of the month, the polls showed that the Doug Ford-led Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario was on cruise control a year out from the next provincial election. The outcome not really in doubt. On pace for another sizable majority Conservative government. 3 weeks later, it's a different story. Abacus data, new poll out this morning. It's done right after the Premier's news conference last night. Very much a snapshot in time, okay? And, it's not good. It's not good. These numbers for Doug Ford, they fell out of the ugly tree. I'm telling you, they hit every branch on the way down. They have the pollsters call them the negatives and the positives, okay? And Ford's personal numbers, his so-called negatives, they're falling fast. Down 9 points in a week. And his positives, that's the number of people in Ontario who say they have a positive view of Doug Ford. Do you have a positive or negative view of Doug Ford? I have a positive view of Doug Ford. Do you have a positive view of Doug Ford? The number of people saying that down 11 points in a week. Now, the lefties, they never liked the guy in the newspapers today. Full page ads from the teachers' unions. The Doug Ford, the big meanie. Doug Ford, cuts hurt kids, all this stuff, right? So now, for the lefties, it's just a matter of they can't stand him even more. But the interesting thing about this Abacus poll is those who are more on the right side of things, like guys like me, they're now telling pollsters like David Coletto that they don't like Doug Ford either. And how he's handling things lately. Number of people in this poll who say they're right-wingers, who also say they have a negative view of the Premier, that is up 12 points in a week. Yikes. Now, meantime, there have been these reports that Premier Ford has been frustrated. He's been very frustrated about all the leaks. Stop talking to the media. He's worried about all the leaks coming from his office and the cabinet discussions. So you see it in the media. Sources say, on condition of anonymity. Not authorized to speak about the issue, but they're whispering into reporters' ears. Well, now the Toronto Star, this has got to drive Doug Ford crazy, okay? The poor guy, he's got to self-isolate for 14 days because somebody around him has tested positive for COVID. And what's happening? They're leaking, and they're not just leaking policy stuff, they're leaking like silly personal stuff. The Toronto Star has dropped this story. It's all, memes on the internet. It's getting howls of laughter in social media because it suggests that Doug Ford doesn't know how to use a laptop computer. Doug Ford is working from home now because he has to self-isolate, and this story says, and his staff are training him how to use a laptop computer. Back into this narrative, Doug Ford's a big dummy. Anybody named Ford's a big dummy. His brother was a dummy, and he's a dummy. Oh, and by the way, Doug Ford, how old and out of touch is Doug Ford? He uses a BlackBerry. Right? He uses a 6-year-old BlackBerry because he likes it, he's familiar with it, and he's got a stockpile of them. And when one breaks, he picks up the other one. And if none of them work anymore, he knows his shop in Mississauga, and he goes and he buys one for $150, 6-year-old BlackBerry phone. And then you have Andrea Horvath. Andrea Horvath, not channeling her inner Michelle Obama, okay? When they go low, we go high. No, that's not Andrea Horvath, the NDP leader. She said yesterday, the premier has blood on his hands. Blood on his hands.
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know how you regain trust from that. The premier's got blood on his hands. I know it's a harsh thing to say, but that's exactly what's happening in our province, and I take no pleasure in saying it. I'm as horrified as everyone.
Andrea, you take great pleasure in saying that. Blood on his hands. He's got blood on his hands. My gosh. First it was nails on a chalkboard, now it's blood on his hands. So Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, will try to, pick your cliche, move the needle, change the channel. He is doing a news conference this morning. In about a half an hour from now, we'll carry it for you here on City News, scheduled to start at 9:45. Doug Ford first. He's fully trained on the use of the laptop, and he will have a virtual news conference, sources say. It's an announcement about paid sick days. Sources say. Paid sick days. This has been the Ontario obsession. Paid sick days. Did they ever ask John Horgan about paid sick days, or Premier Fury in Newfoundland, or Premier Rankin in Nova Scotia? They ever ask them about paid sick days and why their provinces don't have paid sick days? Or Premier Higgs in New Brunswick, they don't have paid sick days in New Brunswick. Did anybody ever ask Premier Pallister about paid sick days? Don't remember any stories about any of that. And yet it is the issue for the media and the opposition, like paid sick days. It's a cure-all. It's better than vaccines. 10 provinces in Canada. You know how many offer paid sick days? 2. Prince Edward Island, population about the same as Nepean, and Quebec. Quebec offers 2 paid sick days. Prince Edward Island offers 1 paid sick day after you've been employed for 5 years. And yet, my gosh, it's an obsession for the political opposition and, quite frankly, the political media in this province. And international travel. What's happening at the airports? And I get back into that issue again today. India is, it's having a terrible time right now with COVID-19. More than 300,000 cases in the last 24 hours. More than 2,000 people have died in the last 24 hours in India because of COVID-19. There's a shortage of medical oxygen. Oxygen tanks are being looted. It's awful. A double mutant strain of the virus. Now, they're calling it, for now, a variant of interest. It's not necessarily a variant of concern, but it is a variant of interest. But whatever they're calling it, it's here in Canada. How did it get here? Do tell. It's in Quebec. At least 1 case. Or Trois-Rivières. It's in British Columbia. 34 cases in British Columbia. And if it's one thing we've learned, if it's there, if it's in Trois-Rivières, if it's in British Columbia, then it's probably here already, and we just haven't detected it yet. It's naive to think it's not in Montreal or in Toronto or in Peel or in Ottawa, for that matter. And yet, this morning, you know what? One of the first international flights that arrived at Pearson International this morning arrived from New Delhi, India. Why? Reporter Brian Passifum has a story this morning for Post Media. Quote, listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. Between April 1st and April 19th, both Air Canada and Air India operated 47 infected flights from Delhi to Canadian airports. 47. 166 international flights have landed in Canada so far this month, including 27 from the United States, 14 from Paris, 13 from Doha, 8 from Frankfurt, destinations served by Air Canada. But 47 flights from India this month with someone on the plane with COVID-19. 166 international flights in all, and more will arrive today. So I want to get back into this with you again this morning during our Talkback Hour. Do it every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock on City News. Hour of calls and opinions, arguments, and debate. It's the hottest hour of talk radio in town. Should these flights be grounded? Pretty easy question. You want tighter restrictions at Canadian airports? It's something that has just bedeviled Team Trudeau from day one of all of this, and it seems nothing's changed. 750-1310, that's our call-in line. You can share your opinion and have your say right here on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
The opening a business especially in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, is very challenging. First, people don't know me, people don't know my product. To build a new clientele, to build a trust for them, to show them that I care about it. I do love my food. That was the biggest challenge. And of course, in all lockdown, where I had to face it regards my employee, girls, ladies, what they work for me. I didn't want to tell them, sorry, I'm closed, I'm not having a job for you. No, they have families, they have kids to feed. So this is very important because we are family orientated. And we decided to open. We, of course, essential business. So been very tough, very, very tough, as we didn't see people on the road. Market was completely quiet, but we knew it that we have to wait, and we knew it that we're gonna be fine. In this town, we built online shop, Vedel Online, and we did Uber Eats, which one is picking up and is very, very popular. We have a really good feedback. So this is the song from my heart. And and we try to expand. I'm thinking about opening another location. So I want to make Vedel famous. I want to make the Vedel place to be for all the families with kids. Try the traditional food, what the grandparents cooked in the countries when they're from, or even Canadian people. They're more than welcome to come and try our famous pierogis. I try to be passionate about my food, organic food made with love, with all homemade, organic. So you can find food from all over the Europe: Polish, German, Ukrainian, Romanian, French, Armenian. So all kind of different types of food. Homemade lunches. We focus on the homemade lunches, grandma style. I keep always saying, like in my Genia Babcia house, how she cooked. I wanted this love and this food over here because I believe that will bring all people around me. And all the organic cold cuts, lovely selection of sausages, cheeses, European cheeses, great selections of mustards, French cookies. All what you need from Europe you can find here at the Vedel Touch of Europe. If you think good way, that's it. You have to. I had the option to cry in the corner and say, oh, pandemic is coming. No, you need to stand up and fight for it and have your eyes open, think outside of the box and do it.
Voice.
Strong opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Randall Denley's here, post-media columnist and author. Good morning, Randall.
Good morning, Rob.
So the news conference in about a half an hour from Premier Ford. What do you think he's going to say? What do you think that's about?
Oh, I'm sure he's going to talk about the sick leave program. That seems to be the thing that's been widely advertised now, so I would expect him to talk about that.
Okay.
I'm sure he'll be asked about his handiwork last week on how it's gone and why he's reversed so many things.
Okay. He's been accused, well, we just played the clip. Andrea Horvath says he has blood on his hands. He's been accused of ignoring the science. What do you think about that? Doug Ford ignores the science. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a very popular narrative right now, and in fact, it's what I'm working on today for the National Post. When you look at the 6 things that the scientists demanded this week after Ford's press conference, these are the 6 things that must be done. With the exception of sick leave, he's done them. There isn't any big gap between Ford and science as far as I can see. Should he have acted sooner? Sure. Should have acted 2 weeks ago. But really, what is it that isn't being done that they say should be done? I have to say scientists get kind of an easy pass on this one, too, because when it comes down to specifics of things, that's where it gets challenging. But they don't make those recommendations. In the presentation last week before Ford's announcement, the science board said, look, we're very concerned about mobility. There's still too much mobility. They presented various graphics, including one for recreation and leisure, too much mobility. So Ford says, okay, well, yeah, we're going to do something about that. So we're going to close, golf courses, tennis courts, pickleball courts, playgrounds. We're going to reduce mobility. Mm-hmm. And to make sure that people stay at home, we're going to give the police new powers just to sort of stop and harass and ask you why you're not in your house. Some of those things did not fly, but you can see where they're coming from was the science side. And when they didn't fly, the science people said, oh, no, we didn't mean playgrounds. Wow, that's crazy. People should be outdoors exercising. Of course they should be outdoors exercising. But when you call for less mobility and recreation, something has to change. So I think they've been kind of having it both ways, but I think the underlying narrative here is Doug Ford's an idiot. We've been telling you, we've been telling you this for months.
Doesn't even know how to use a computer. No,
he's a knuckle-dragging, conservative, flat earth kind of a guy, and we're scientists,
right?
Which makes us very, very smart guys. So whatever we suggest is obviously right. So even when he takes our advice, somehow he's still wrong.
I mean, for example, you mentioned that the science table outlined 6 things. The third one on the list was about the vaccine rollout. I have it right in front of me here. Accelerating the vaccination of essential workers and those who live in hotspots. Vaccines are essential in slowing the pandemic. Immediately allocating as many doses as possible. 2, hotspot neighborhoods, vulnerable populations, essential workers, distribution, administration of vaccines overall. Well, I mean, would you find a political leader anywhere in the country who would disagree with any of that?
No,
that's about supply, but that's about supply there, right?
Yes, exactly. Last week he said that's what we're going to do. They set aside 920,000 future vaccine doses for exactly that kind of problem, as they should. But we're not that far advanced with vaccine that we can say, yeah, we had 1 million doses kicking around, kind of wondering who we might give them to, so let's give them to those folks. The appointments and the supply are pretty much in sync, so that appointments are made on the premise that we'll have as much as the federal government has promised. And age has been the biggest parameter for that so far. And of course, scientists said, well, you got to do the old people first because they're the ones who are mostly in hospital and dying, which made perfect sense. So the government did that. And now it's like, why are you vaccinating other people? Because there isn't enough right now today to say we're going to do old people and hotspot workers. We've got good numbers of vaccine coming over the next few weeks. So I think, more will be done for hotspot areas and essential workers, and as it should be. It makes perfect sense. But I think the thing that gets lost a bit here is that you can sit there on the science table and make a recommendation. It's often difficult to make that happen, like snap right now. And even after they announced it, then days later the science table comes out and demands it. Well, guys, you got that. It would have been nice if that group had said, look, we know the Premier is being criticized for not following science, but when you look at our 6 recommendations, the only one he hasn't picked up on is the paid sick leave.
Right.
Now he says he's going to do that, so we think he's listening. But, the message was just the opposite because everything they wanted wasn't done the instant they wanted it.
And again, one of the points I want to press upon people this morning on the paid sick days. There were 2 paid sick days, but it was in a big bill with many, many labor reforms, and there were a lot of things wrong with that bill that was passed by the Wynne government in the dying days of the Wynne government. I can give some of the history on that, but I mean, what would make more sense? Do we want every single province now to come up with its own regime for paid sick days, and it will have 10 provinces all reinventing their own wheels? Or would it have made more sense, say, from the get-go, to have the federal government with an adequate and efficient paid sick day program, which is clearly not the case, Randall?
Yeah, if you're a scientist in Ontario, kind of a politically influential place, maybe your best target here would be the federal government, which has a program. If your critique, as it seems to be popular, is that it's too slow, it's too cumbersome. I mean, more than 300,000 people in Ontario have used it, so it must be usable, but it's not good enough. So wouldn't the point be to say to the federal government, here's what you need to do to tweak this program and make it more usable for people? Oh, okay, we can do that. Yeah, we'll just change the rules. We've already got a pot of money and a program in place. No, let's reinvent the program here in Ontario, build it on top of the federal program, and if Doug Ford hasn't already done that, then he's just a guy he doesn't care about the sick. That's, I think, what I find offensive about this sort of Andrea Horwath take on all this, and she's certainly not alone, is that if the Conservative government hasn't done what she thinks should be done now, it's because of some bad motive, or they don't like people.
Oh, he's got blood on his hands.
Yeah, it's just, give me a break. I mean, he's doing the toughest job in Ontario right now, because you got to weigh all this stuff, and everything that goes wrong. Now, you just get buried under an avalanche of criticism. And it's understandable because people are fed up. It's gone on a long time. A month ago or 6 weeks ago, we thought, hey, we're coming out of this. It's going to be okay. Vaccines, everybody's thinking positive thoughts. Now it's worse than ever. Hard to wrap your head around that. Easy to find someone to blame. Well, who better than Doug Ford? Shouldn't he have been able to fix all this? I've been critical of him, too. I think he has been too slow. I think some of the obvious things haven't been done. When you see the medical officers of health in Peel and Toronto say, hey, look, you've had more than 5 cases in your workplace, we're shutting you down for 10 days. That makes perfect sense. That should have been done long ago, and in fact could have been done by those same medical officers long ago in Ottawa as well. So let's do some of those things, but we're not completely off track in what we're doing here. I think people they're losing sight of that. The Ford's kind of lost sight of it, too, when he was talking last week about the inferno. His eyes were probably bugging out of his head. These same science guys get him wound up in a knot. He goes out and overreacts. Then the science guys say, we're being ignored. It's kind of a ridiculous situation, Rob.
Okay. Thanks for this morning, Randall Denley.
All right.
Greatly appreciated. Randall Denley, look for his column. It'll drop today on the website of the National Post. My conversation with Dr. Vera Etches, Ottawa's Chief Medical Officer of Health, is coming right up here on City News.
101 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, April 22nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, -2 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's -1. And here's what's making news this hour. The Premier is set to host a COVID update scheduled in about 15 minutes from now. City News will carry the briefing live for you. This is the first time we are seeing the Premier since a media briefing Friday. He has been self-isolating since a staff member tested positive for COVID-19. Ottawa's Chief Medical Officer of Health says we need further measures to halt the spread of the virus. Dr. Vera Etches says she is asking for stricter measures on what businesses can open, going as far as to say some curbside pickups should be halted at non-essential stores. All Smiths Falls police officers have now received their first shot of COVID vaccine. The chief says he would like to thank the Leeds Grenville Lanark Health Unit for acting so quickly, getting those members vaccinated. The Prime Minister pledging Canada will slash its greenhouse gas emissions by up to 45% within the next 10 years. The cut applies to 2005 emission levels. The new target is higher than the 36% reduction in emissions the Liberal government said it could achieve under existing measures by the year 2030. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
And for the latest on the current situation with COVID-19 in our community, we're joined once again by Dr. Vera Etches, Ottawa's Chief Medical Officer of Health. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Rob.
How would you describe the current situation?
I think that people in Ottawa have been doing some challenging work of wearing masks and limiting their contacts, and it's probably making a difference. We are starting to see some of the early indicators starting to go horizontal instead of up, and that's good. We want to follow this and encourage people that what they're doing does make a difference.
What indicators right now would you say are encouraging?
The wastewater has been encouraging. However, it also hasn't been as reliable with the spring melt and the runoff. The percent of people that are testing positive, it's a terrible number, actually. It's over 10% of people that go for a COVID test that are coming back positive, but at least it's no longer going up. And the number of people that test positive, that rate, is coming down. However, that one is related also to how many people go for a test, and we do have fewer people going for a test since schools are out. So that's why we need to continue to watch this. The hospitalizations are a very solid indicator. They take a little more time to see any change, but I'm hoping we're seeing some stability there too.
And what has you worried?
What has me worried is the situation across the province. In other parts of Ontario, where we don't see these kind of indicators that the curve is going horizontal, there are parts of the GTA where the rates are still going up, and it's leading to their hospitals not being able to manage patients, even sending patients to Ottawa. That kind of rise can't continue. That is something needs to be done.
You would like the provincial government to review the types of workplaces that can have staff on site. Why?
Because of the fact that we have still rising rates of COVID in Ontario that are leading to outbreaks and deaths and hospital pressures that can't be sustained if they continue to rise. We know that workplace outbreaks are growing in number. And in particular, the kinds of workplaces that are of concern are where large outbreaks occur in manufacturing and distribution centers. That isn't the picture we're seeing in Ottawa, where we have smaller outbreaks that have been managed. Our team here has been able to keep up to work with businesses. in Ottawa, we have instruction from me where if 2 people in a business test positive, we need to be informed. And we've had very good cooperation with almost all businesses. It's a rare exception to be able to work through managing those outbreaks, and that continues. And so, this is about really looking at the places that pose risk and which of those are essential.
That being said, your colleagues in other health units in Toronto and Peel have used their authority under Section 22 under the Ontario Health Promotion Act to order businesses to close if they have had workplace outbreaks. More than 5 cases reported that the business will close for 14 days. You have not gone down that road yet.
No, I'm not. I'm not planning to issue a Section 22 order like that because we don't have the magnitude of the problem, and we have the capacity to manage outbreaks with workplaces. So it's very rare that we have a workplace with more than 5 to 10 people testing positive. And those situations, again, we've had cooperation. So I don't see the need, but it's something we review every day. Every day we ask ourselves, what's needed here in Ottawa to manage this situation? And, businesses are working really hard to keep employees and clients safe. What we're encouraging businesses here to do is to pay attention to the break times. When people go out for smoke or they take their lunch break, make sure that they're keeping 2 meters distance because that's when the masks come off.
Okay. How do you think the vaccination program is going in Ottawa so far?
Well, I'm really pleased that we've been focused on using the vaccine as soon as it comes in, and we have been focused, of course, on older adults, people over 60 who are most likely to be hospitalized. People in our hospitals, the average age is still over 60, and unfortunately the rate of death is so much higher in people over 60. So we have actually almost protected our target of over 75% of this population. So we are going to, continue to see that population then is going to be protected from hospitalization and death. And we're actually probably after next week and the end of April, able to then provide more vaccine to younger age groups where people are not able to work from home. I mean, we've been focused on people who can't work from home in older age groups and in neighborhoods over 50. But as vaccine supply starts to pick up again in May, this is a new population of focus to really go into younger ages and go by sectors of different types of workers who cannot work from home. So I'm excited to be able to expand that way. Were you okay with the decision to lower the age of eligibility for the AstraZeneca vaccine down to 40? There seems to be, in that age group, a lot of uptake on that. A lot of people in that age group taking advantage of that, Doctor. It is good when people can access vaccine, so I appreciate that we have more vaccine coming into our community. And what I would encourage is for people who cannot work from home to make use of that channel. So please, if you are somebody who's going out to work, do check out the pharmacy near you and see if you can get an appointment. Where we have control over the vaccine, which is totally separate from the pharmacy program, that is where, for example, we distribute vaccine to primary care doctors' offices. We are asking them to use that vaccine for people over 40 who cannot work from home. Just a little more focus where we're able to direct how the vaccine is used, and that there are other eligible populations, people with the highest risk health conditions as well. What is your current advice or guidance on interprovincial travel? Just given what happened in Ottawa this week with police on bridges between Ottawa and Gatineau. What is your guidance there? Well, we're one region, so for the duration of the pandemic, the pattern of COVID that we've seen is that we typically have very similar rates of COVID on both sides of the river, similar trends. So the community really functions as one, with so many workers coming back and forth across the border. Especially, we saw concerns when the border was monitored 24/7, with healthcare workers being able to get to work. So, I think that the message is to stay home. We're in a stay-at-home order, to not cross the border for non-essential purposes, but it isn't helpful when there are challenges for essential travel.
What is your opinion on the need for paid sick days? The Ontario government is now saying it's maybe days away from bringing in a paid sick day regime for the province.
Yeah, it is something that we've seen in our public health work, that when people are not able to stay home with any pay, that they're more likely to work when they might have a mild symptom. They may think it's not COVID, it's just a headache, it's just something minor, and not have the ability, to choose between that and putting food on the table or paying the rent is an impossible choice, really. So the Board of Health has already taken a position that we need to take a look at supporting workers to be able to stay home when they're sick. And this could make a difference to decrease transmission in workplaces. Okay.
I'm asking this more for my producer because I don't play golf anymore, but my producer David is a very avid golfer. He would rather be playing golf than be at work. Golf is a big thing in Ottawa, Doctor. There's 70 courses within an hour's drive of Parliament Hill. I would like to know if you agree or disagree with this decision to close golf courses. So we're the only place in North America where you can't play golf.
Yes, so we always look at the risk of activities and try to choose the lower risk activities, and it is important to be outside, it's important to be active. So where risk comes in with golf is if people are in close contact with people outside of their household. So some of the measures that can be used to reduce that risk would be to limit the foursomes to people in the same household, or and wearing masks if you're in close contact, say around the flag. Those are kinds of ways that we could proceed to be able to use golf courses with less risk.
Okay. I thank you for your time as always this morning. A great pleasure to have you on our program again, Dr. Etches. Thanks again.
Thank you, Rob.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I wanted to give gifts to my volunteers, so I started making, I knew this is a skill I had, so I made chocolate that had a cultural based with a teaching, because culture here is not just a little part, it's the large part, it's the fundamental part of our organization. So then we started doing, just little programs, and we sell a few at a fair. And then we started getting contracts. People were starting to enjoy the chocolates, and started getting more and more contracts all across Canada. Then we decided to become a social enterprise, and we were able to create 2 jobs. And Val is one of our chocolatiers, very talented. We were able to help her with employment.
We started just with a little bit in the kitchen, doing a little bit of chocolate together, and next thing, it's just kind of taken off. And it's great, because I love to be creative, and we get to create a lot and make up stuff, and it's just I just love it. It's just great that we get to make money back for Wabano, and it's helping me out, and we're helping just everybody out, Wabano and everything.
We met a very socially conscious business owner being around town, and we decided to partner, because beans and chocolate, coffee and chocolate are sort of created the same way, and there's and they're very one origin bean, so it was a good pairing together. And it's been a fantastic partnership for both of us.
I was fortunate enough to get introduced to Pierrette, the head of Wagano Fine Chocolates, through a local networking group. And I was completely intrigued by the social enterprise that she was running, and then I looked at what we were doing, trying to support local business and supporting local communities, and it was a perfect match, and it's been fantastic ever since.
We make every batch by hand. We temper it by hand to get to the consistency it needs to be to make a good chocolate. And one of the best, also wonderful things we did, we've connected with Ed, with being around town, and our coffee bars have been amazing hit. So we're really excited about the connection with our coffee.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Thank again, Dr. Vera Etches, Ottawa's Chief Medical Officer of Health, for our interview, our discussion this morning. The Doug Ford News Conference was supposed to start at 9:45. The latest that we have from the press gallery at Queen's Park is that it is delayed until 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock, it's a Zoom thing. And we have been credentialed, and we'll be bringing it to you as soon as it begins. You know, just speaking of Dr. Etches and the other medical officers of health across the province, we've heard a lot about this Section 22. Section 22. It's in the news from time to time. Section 22. What is it, though? What is it, though, and what does it do? Section 22. Well, it's a provincial statute. It is Section 22 of a provincial statute, and the statute is called the Health Protection and Promotion Act of 1990. And Section 22 is the part of the act that gives a local medical officer of health, someone like Dr. Vera Etches or Dr. Paul Remiliotis in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, or Dr. Cushman in Renfrew County, it gives them a great deal of power. Really shocking when you read it, actually, how much power that this act grants those individuals. And some of that power has been used. Some of it remains untapped. And I only bring this up purely for informational purposes, ladies and gentlemen, just so you have some knowledge. So we all have a better understanding of what local medical officers of health can do and can't do, because under this law, they can do a lot of stuff in the name of preventing the spread of a communicable disease. Communicable disease is the language used in the law. Communicable disease, COVID-19. For example, the local medical officer of health, just by way of a written order, I'm invoking Section 22 powers, can, quote, require the owner or occupier of a premises to close the premises or a specific part of the premises. For example, we've seen in Toronto and Peel now, you have more than 5 cases, we're closing it down for 14 days. Okay? Signage. That's kind of authority falls under this. We require the placarding of premises to give notice of an order requiring the closing of a premises. But here's something else that I didn't know was part of this act. You can be ordered into isolation. Quote, requiring any person that the order states or has or may have a communicable disease or may be infected with an agent of a communicable disease to isolate himself or herself and remain in isolation from other persons. Now, I found this kind of surprising. That's Dr. Etches, just as an example, would have the authority to order you into isolation, but even beyond that, has the authority to order you to see a doctor, which is some extraordinary power right there. Under the language in this act, Section 22, require the person to whom the order is directed submit to an examination by a physician and deliver to the medical officer of health a report by the physician as to whether or not the person has a communicable disease or is not infected with an agent of a communicable disease. That's kind of extraordinary, don't you think? Dr. Etches, or someone in that position, could also order someone to undergo treatment for the communicable disease. Require the person in respect of a communicable disease to place him or herself forthwith under the care and treatment of a physician. See, I find that interesting purely because I didn't know that the authority went that far. A medical officer of health, beyond I order you into isolation or quarantine, I order you to close your business or part of your business, like your dining room, for example. How about this? I order you to see a doctor. Okay, now I order you to accept treatment from that doctor. I only bring that up because I didn't know that is how far it actually went, but it does. It actually supersedes health consent in this province. We have an act called the Healthcare Consent Act. Because you're not supposed to, your health officials, health practitioners, they should not treat you without your consent. I think that's generally accepted and understood. And the Healthcare Consent Act says that this act supersedes the Healthcare Consent Act, which is quite extraordinary. The Healthcare Consent Act, a health practitioner who proposes a treatment for a person shall not administer the treatment and shall take reasonable steps to ensure that it is not administered. But a local medical officer of health could override that under this Section 22. They have that authority. Not only can they order you to see a doctor, but they can order you to be treated by a doctor. Under the law in Ontario, as it is written, medical consent must, A, relate to the treatment. Your consent must be informed. Your consent must be given voluntarily. Your consent must be obtained through, must not be obtained through fraud or misrepresentation. And under Section 22, all of that is overridden. Could be overridden. Look, again, it's just purely for information purposes. I'm not even worried that some of those extraordinary powers are being invoked or would ever be invoked. I just find it interesting how far they actually go. And that is the only reason why I wanted to bring that to your attention today. Now, as we wait for the Premier Ford news conference, again, it was scheduled for 9:45. It has been pushed back to 10 o'clock. Okay, we're going to carry it for you. We'll have it for you here on City News. Keep in mind the context of all of this. This is the first time Doug Ford has been seen. Doug Ford is taking questions from the media since the Friday news conference that, let's face it, is not really getting rave reviews. Is it? The one that said you can't go to the playground, the one that banned golf, the one that put the police checkpoints on bridges, the one that proposed random police stops, otherwise known as carding, and some of that the very next day having to be walked back. We now have this new poll. Ford's numbers are tanking. His personal numbers are tanking. The numbers overall for the Ontario PC Party are holding up compared to Ford's personal approval ratings. So this is going to be a major league attempt to kind of regain some traction, regain some trust, I think, do some damage control. recapture a little bit of the news cycle. You know that paid sick days has been a big media story for the last several weeks. Certainly been a media obsession and an obsession for the political opposition. The lack of paid sick days, the fact that there were 2 paid sick days, and when the Ford government first came into office, it repealed many of the labor reforms that were brought in the end times of the Kathleen Wynne government. So we are anticipating, because this was telegraphed earlier in the week by Paul Calandra, the House Leader, former Harper MP, that Doug Ford is probably going to announce something to do with paid sick days. That's what the news conference will be about. There'll be an announcement, and then he'll take some reporters' questions starting at 10 o'clock. So we'll probably hold off on taking some calls during the talkback hour because we want to actually get the news before we ask for your reaction to the news. And then coming up in the final hour of the program, there's still lots of stuff. I'm so happy that there's going to be a CFL season. That was welcome news yesterday. I really hope that it gets going. They're planning a 14-game regular season, a Grey Cup in December. Arash Madani is going to join us from Sportsnet. He covers the CFL for Sportsnet. That's coming up at 11:15. It's kind of a sports-themed hour. Mike Kelly is the executive director of the Golf Association of Ontario. We're kind of on this golf kick. Why is golf banned in Ontario? Golf in Canada is a big business. Employs about 250,000 people. Contributes about $18 billion a year to the economy. It's well beyond golf, right? It's golf. It's all the tourism that's related to golf. It's, golf resorts. It's golf instruction. It's golf equipment. It's a huge industry, golf. And for the most part, it's pretty much shut down from one end of the province to the other. March of Dimes. There's a really cool little thing, sponsored content in the Globe and Mail this week about the March of Dimes and how the March of Dimes started. The March of Dimes was a march of mothers marching across communities in Canada, collecting dimes to help find a vaccine against polio. So we're going to talk to Leonard Baker, the president and CEO, March of Dimes Canada, the Mission Immunity campaign. So all of that is still ahead here on the Rob Snow Show, here on City News.
City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, April 22nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, a -1 degree. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The Premier is addressing the latest COVID numbers and measures in the province. Now, Rob Snow says sources have told him Doug Ford will be addressing the issue of paid sick time. The Liberals have a bill introduced in the legislature covering that topic. Leader Stephen Del Duca says now that Doug Ford is in a political crisis, he's done a 180. Doug Ford, he says, wants to play hero for thousands when he's been acting like a villain. He is scheduled to join a Zoom meeting shortly. We will take you to that briefing in just a couple of moments. The latest numbers of COVID cases in Ontario. We've dipped below 4,000 for the day today, with 3,682 coming from about 54,000 tests. There have also been 40 more deaths in Ontario. 279 of these new cases are in Ottawa, 10 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 64 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, and 12 in Renfrew. After requesting the province reduce its list of essential businesses, Ottawa's top doctor is breaking down why she and the City Board of Health feel the need for a change. Here's City News reporter Alex Gouge.
Medical Officer of Health Dr. Vera Etches says workplace outbreaks continue to grow in numbers. She tells the Rob Snow Show why there is need to cut back the level of essential businesses allowed to be open.
Because of the fact that we have still rising rates of COVID in Ontario that are leading to outbreaks and deaths and hospital pressures that can't be sustained if they continue to rise.
The doctor says a Section 22 order to close businesses with 5 or more COVID-19 infections still isn't on the table, since she feels Ottawa has the capacity to manage those outbreaks. She adds the situation of the novel coronavirus in the capital is reevaluated each day and changes will be made as necessary. Alex Gouge, City News.
City News time, 10:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
It's a mainly cloudy, windy day for Ottawa, the Valley, and Smiths Falls. The wind out of the west-northwest will climb to 7 for the high today. Continuing windy tonight, partly cloudy and +1, and tomorrow sun and cloud and 15. For today, the high 7.
And right now it's -2 degrees in Ottawa. It's -1 in Smiths Falls. A missing Smiths Falls man located is missing again. Smiths Falls police assured by OPP 23-year-old Blake Horn had been stopped in Chesterville last night. Smiths Falls police told that he was found, but before he could be assessed, he fled police. Police and Blake's family are concerned for his safety. He's described as 5'8" with a slim build, shoulder-length brown hair, and wearing glasses. He is traveling with a border collie and maybe in a gray 2005 Acura. Anyone with information is asked to contact Smiths Falls Police. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Take it out of the Doug Ford news conference.
Who, despite their best efforts, tested positive for COVID-19 earlier this week. And I assure you, it is not lost on me that unlike many people, I'm able to isolate and continue working. For too many people right now, that's not the case. And during these unprecedented times, regardless of where you work or what you do, if you're forced to go into isolation or quarantine, your job should be safe. That's why Ontario was the first province to introduce legislation to have job protective leave for COVID. But it isn't enough to know you can't lose your job. You also need to know you won't lose your income. And if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you shouldn't have to wait long for the support you need. And for months, my ministers and I have been trying to work with the federal government to fix the existing federal sick pay program. Unfortunately, Monday's federal budget didn't include the important improvements to the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit that we needed to see. That's why we're now working on our own solution to fill those gaps for everyone in Ontario. Because I want workers to know, as I have right from the beginning, I will always have your back. And I want all of you to know that I will always try to do what's right. And that means if we get something wrong or make a mistake, we'll fix it as soon as we can, like we did this past weekend. But I know that many people continue to be unhappy right now. And I understand that I accept the responsibility for that. Let me be clear. When it comes to protecting lives, protecting our hospitals and our people, we can't waver. But at this stage in the pandemic, over a year into this, going through this terrible third wave, I assure you that there are no easy choices left. I know that these lockdowns, they've been devastating for people. It means telling someone they can't see their family or take a vacation. It means forcing someone to close their business, lose their paycheck. It means telling someone not to properly celebrate a wedding or sadly be able to mourn the loss of someone we love. For some, it's been dealing with isolation at home, the struggles with mental health and addiction. For others, it's been going to work, despite the stress of working in a job that puts you and your loved ones at a higher risk of getting COVID. I hear it every day, every single day. People telling me their stories, the stories that could make you cry, families that haven't been able to hold hand. Hold on, folks. I apologize. Hold the hand of their mom or dad as they passed away because of COVID-19 restrictions in hospitals. Healthcare workers who've been pushed to the absolute limit, working to save lives. I want you to know that I hear you. I understand you're going through. I understand your frustration. This experience, this pandemic, is something that has affected every single person.
So the Doug Ford news conference is happening at the Ford home of his late mother in Etobicoke, and across the board, it was described as a Zoom Ford press conference, and whatever it is, he was in the backyard, quite emotional, as you heard, choking up. It went offline. Is it back online now, David? No? Okay. So while that is happening, Aaron O'Toole, the federal Conservative leader, is having his own news conference about securing the border. And I have a feeling this has to do with the situation at the airports. Another hot topic this week. Why they would have dueling, competing news conferences at the same time doesn't make any sense. But nevertheless, take you to this now.
Aujourd'hui, M. O'Toole prendra 8 questions. We will have the first question from the floor. Nous allons prendre la première question de la salle.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Kevin Gallagher, CTV National News. You said hotspot nations temporarily suspend those flights. Could you sort of spell out what those nations are? And what about domestic travel? There are still COVID cases and variants circulating within the country.
Thank you, Kevin. The most important thing is to move quickly and stop flights temporarily from hotspot countries like India, like Brazil, where the new variants are out of control and at wide risk of spreading in their population, and without sufficient vaccination rates in those countries to prevent it. Our country doesn't have sufficient vaccination rates because Mr. Trudeau has been so slow to procure vaccines. So without those rates, that spread could come here. And the dangerous variant we're seeing in India has severe health risks that need to be stopped. We then need to analyze which countries people could travel to come to Canada indirectly, and have a series of measures, including rapid screening and testing and quarantining, to stop the variants from taking hold in Canada. But those two countries, at a bare minimum, would be the starting point.
So, Mr. O'Toole, as the Prime Minister, I think he would defend it this way, right, that there already are screening measures and quarantine measures, hotel quarantines for international travelers. Would you have any other ideas about, should those be stricter? Should there be a longer hotel quarantine? Is there, what could be done to improve or enhance the measures that are already at the borders?
Well, right now, there needs to be a stop, a cessation of flights from hotspot countries completely. Mr. Trudeau was 1 year late in setting up basic entry screening, rapid testing at airports. He said he was doing that for months at the early part of the pandemic and did not get it done. We then need to look at countries with high flight rates from those other countries so that people can't indirectly find a loophole to get into Canada if they have a high risk of spread. So we would like to see immediate action on key countries, and then a much more public conversation about the risks because our population is not properly vaccinated, and which variants that we need to have more restricted measures to keep out of Canada.
Okay, so that is federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole. We have these kind of competing Conservative news conferences happening right now. We have at the federal level here in Ottawa, Erin O'Toole, the leader of the official opposition. He is calling for a grounding of flights and from the hotspot countries, Brazil and India. Meantime, Premier Ford, his news conference was offline, virtual news conference was offline. It has just resumed, so we join this live on City News.
Is this only going to be COVID specific? Like, is it going to end when COVID is no longer a problem, or will paid sick days continue for workers that we now say are essential?
Yeah, no, good question, Randy. What we're doing is we're fixing the gap, we're bridging the gap of the federal government. And, you know, I think everyone has seen myself and our Minister of Labor, Minister of Health out there for months. And you know, we need to work with the program the feds have, but there is a gap about 2 to 3 days that no one gets paid. So we're going to be working on that, and we're going to come up with a very strong program to protect the workers.
So by the sounds of it, there are no details just yet, but Doug Ford is vowing that there will be a paid sick day regime in the province of Ontario. This is a virtual news conference from the Ford compound in Etobicoke.
Yep. Okay, I can hear you.
Sorry about that. I'm wondering about going forward with vaccinations. You've had to rethink a lot of things. Are you going to rethink who is eligible for vaccination again? You know, we're talking to childcare workers, daycare workers, and they're saying that, you know, they're not in line they're not a priority group, and yet they have to be around little kids who can't wear masks. Those workers and frontline workers in grocery stores and that sort of thing. Are you going to rethink who you're vaccinating?
Yeah, well, Randy, when it comes to the vaccines, I want to thank everyone out there. You know, the person in the mass vaccination centers, the primary care docs, and the pharmacies have done a great job, and we just need to get more vaccines and really focus on our plan. And our plan is to target the hotspots, be it Peel. I'll give you an example. Peel has 152 pharmacies. That's more than anywhere in the country. We're ramping up, and as we hope we're going to get more vaccines in May. We're really going to go hard, which we're going right now. We have mobile units set up. We're going into companies, targeting companies, both in Peel. There's 13 public health units with 114 hot areas, really hot areas. So that's where we're going to focus on the vaccines, and we're going to continue. Everyone across the province gets some, but we're going to really focus on those areas.
Your next question comes from Colin DeMello with CTV News. Colin, if you could just unmute your mic.
Hi, good morning, Premier. You can hear me?
Colin.
Perfect. Hello. Premier, you say the buck stops with you, but I think people across this province are wondering, what does that actually mean? Columnists have recently said there is no effective leadership at Queen's Park. Another one said you are showing raging ineptitude, and some are calling for your resignation. Premier, do you still have the moral authority to lead this province as Premier?
Well, columnists and media, they have the right to voice their opinion. I can tell you our team is strong. Our team is united. I'm so grateful to have the best caucus and cabinet that a premier's ever had. We have the most diverse group of people I've ever seen, smartest group of people. And we're going to continue to lead and get through this pandemic. And once we get through this pandemic, we'll turn the economy on like we have in the past. But I'm not one to walk away from anything. You know, we're going to continue to lead throughout this pandemic as we have right from the get-go, Colin. Not long ago, before the whole world saw the third wave, we led North America with the lowest cases per 100,000 for any region our size. You know, we were the first to close down schools, first to put people in lockdown. As much as I hate doing it, we were the first in so many different areas. We were the first to protect people's jobs. We went out and we made sure we took care of companies, giving them a $20,000 grant, up to a $20,000 grant, and then we doubled that for another $20,000. So there's a lot of things, that are moving in the right direction. We see with the vaccines, and let me add the limited amount of vaccines. We're dealing with the cards we've dealt with to get us through this. Once, and the team out there, everyone, thousands of people have shown when we have vaccines, we'll get them into people's arms. We had a record-breaking week this week. Close to 130,000 yesterday, 130,000 or 131,000 the day before. I'm going more than 18 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week. I'm not going to stop.
Follow up, Colin?
Okay, thank you, Premier. You recently said at a news conference that you do not mislead the public. The NDP, though, says that you actually let us off the cliff. They say we are now in free fall, and they say that you have blood on your hands. Premier, why should people trust you to lead us out of the third wave when your government is responsible for bringing us into the third wave and all of the death, destruction, and devastation that has come along with it?
Well, I'm going to totally, sincerely disagree with that last comment, Colin. And first of all, when it comes to the NDP and Andrea Horwath, she has the right to say that. Del Duca has the right to say whatever they want to say. All I know is I've been at this job 24/7, literally, every single day. I haven't missed a day, haven't taken a break. And you know something, to say that I'm the reason there's a third wave around the world, because it is around the world, to say that I'm responsible for not securing our borders that brought this variant and caused the third wave, to say that I'm responsible for not having enough vaccines, that we wouldn't be in this position if we had tightened our borders, if we had ample vaccines like countries around the world. Colin, we wouldn't be in this position right now. But we're going to do everything we can. We're going to move forward. And the results of our actions and the impacts of our actions, I think people will see over the next couple of weeks. And I hope to God that we're right.
Your next question comes from Laura Stone with the Globe and Mail. Laura, if you can unmute your mic.
Hi, Premier. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Laura.
I'm wondering if you can tell Ontarians what exactly you're sorry for. You talked about, off the top, essentially instituting province-wide carding, which all the police forces came out immediately against. Is that what you're sorry for? Are you sorry for closing playgrounds? Are you sorry for not limiting essential businesses as scientific advisors have called for? Are you sorry for not instituting paid sick leave for the past year? What exactly are you sorry for, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, I think once we saw the modeling of 15,000 people, mortalities, they said would be going skyrocketing. Yeah, that puts a scare in you. We saw that the mobility of people, they were moving. We saw it on the cell phone. When we saw the data of the cell phones, people were moving all over the place. This is all about mobility. And what reason I'm sorry we acted too quick on the measures. All I hear is limit mobility, and we move too quick. But anytime, if I make a mistake, I correct it immediately, which we did on the weekend. And again, when it comes to playgrounds, the people were telling me limit the mobility. And we corrected that. I've never locked down the parks. The parks have always been open. Each public health unit, they if they want to lock down the parks, or if they want to, close things, that's their choice. But I think we've done the right decision. And again, the reason I'm here and I'm apologizing, because we moved too quick with having people being pulled over, per se. You call it carding, but I want to tell the people of Ontario, I've never, ever directed the police. I never have, I never will. The police have the discretion in their powers.
Follow-up, Laura?
Premier, I think a lot of the scientific advisors, including the science table, would quibble with your characterization that you moved too fast. I mean, you didn't do anything on essential business. You have not done anything on sick pay, and I know you say that you're going to. And your government has closed all outdoor recreational facilities. I mean, it just seems like everything you guys did on Friday was the opposite of what the advisors were calling for. So how can you say that you moved too fast, and are you going to reverse or change some of those other recommendations that most of the medical community is calling for?
Again, Laura, the modeling was showing that the numbers were going up to 15,000, and thank God they haven't, because of the actions that we've taken in the past. Laura, I want to remind you and everyone, we have this most strict restrictions in all of North America. We've had Peel and Toronto basically in lockdown since September, and we took action. We moved quickly on the schools. We locked down the schools. We made sure we put the stay-at-home order in right away. This is all about mobility. This is not about telling people, you can't go walk in the park or take a jog or ride on the bike. Over and over and over again, every doctor I talk to, and I talk to endless doctors, hundreds of them, say limit the mobility, get your exercise, go ride your bike. After you're done, we need to stay at home. And and in some areas around the world are taking a lot stricter restrictions. I've never been a believer in curfews like you see in Quebec, telling people they can't leave their house permanently. Some docs were saying, do the Australian measures. I don't believe in those draconian measures, but what I can tell you, we have the best doctors in the entire world right here in Ontario. But I can also tell you that I have different views from many different doctors. When I talk to the doctors,
we do have to leave this because we're coming up against our 10:30 newscast. This is the Rob Snow Show. That's Premier Ford. He's doing his first ever virtual news conference from the backyard of home in Etobicoke. I believe it's his mother's home in Etobicoke, and he's apologizing for some of the measures that he implemented on Friday of last week, and then quickly reversed, saying, we got it wrong, we made a mistake. This is City News.
Here at the Thirsty Maiden, we offer a variety of products. So everything from breakfast items, so it's breakfast sandwiches and scones, which have become a staple item here at the cafe. We have an assortment of pastries and cakes and desserts. So we're really big on our dessert bar, which a lot of people come here for. And of course, our delicious coffee beverages. So we do offer not your typical lattes, things like a chocolate banana coconut latte, cinnamon coconut, which is my favorite, and our take on even a pumpkin spice, which we add nutmeg and a dash of cayenne in just to give it a bit of a kick. When you start a business, you don't factor in all the things that could go wrong. You think anything that goes wrong, any failure, it's got to be something on your shoulders. You didn't market right, you're carrying the wrong products, you didn't price your items correctly, all the things, right? But when this pandemic began, things going through my brain were I didn't factor in a pandemic. And we were just starting to grow. We were about to blow up, and I think I spent 2 days crying. And then I shut my business down for, I think, a period of 2 or 3 days. And just being at home during that time, I realized this is not me. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a hard worker. I don't give up, and I'm a go-getter. And I started to think, well, I should probably just start clearing out my freezers and posting and seeing who wants to buy what. And that was sort of how I built my momentum back up. I realized that there's still a large number of people that wanted to support us and were looking for the items that I had to provide. So we started there. Then I reopened literally not even 3 or 4 days after I'd closed my doors, and then started doing curbside pickups and deliveries. Started doing the deliveries myself, free deliveries to the local community, going as far as Bell's Corners and Carp as well. And that's why we're still here. This community has really kept us going a year into the pandemic. We've had a changeover of staff a couple times now, and situations change, and when you can't offer hours and hours for your employees, you don't blame them when they have to go elsewhere. So I think that's also been one of the challenges is recruiting, training, and then they leave, and then bringing in more people and recruiting. And anybody in this industry will tell you that that's something we deal with on a regular basis, whether or not COVID's in the mix or not. But more so now, because every time there's a lockdown, there's a risk of, will we make it through? And then you lay off more staff. And again, their situations and their circumstances change.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Again, we've been following a live news event, the Doug Ford News Conference, which began at 10 o'clock this morning. It's still going, and we'll return to it when we return right after our newscast here on City News.
There's
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, April 22nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, -1 degree. In Smiths Falls, it's 0. And here's what's making news this hour. An emotional Premier Doug Ford addressing the province just in the last few minutes. That actually continues now.
People telling me their stories, the stories that could make you cry, families that haven't been able to hold hand. Hold on, folks. I apologize.
Now, Ford did announce sick pay, which will bridge the gap from the federal government program, is coming from the province of Ontario, and says when the details are released, it will be the best program in the country. Now, the latest numbers from the province today on COVID infections show an additional 3,682 from just over 54,000 tests. 279 of these cases are in Ottawa, 64 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. There are 10 more in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, another dozen in Renfrew. There are also 40 more deaths province-wide. Now back to the Premier. There were calls for his resignation, and Doug Ford says he stands by his united team in this fight against COVID. He outlined measures his government has taken since it began. Ford says mistakes were made, but he's not a quitter. He'll turn his full attention to rebuilding the economy once the pandemic ends. City News Time 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Okay, so the Premier's news conference is just wrapped up, and apologies for the delay, but we'll blame it on the Premier, okay? We'll blame it on the Premier. He was about 15, 20 minutes behind starting, and there was a technical glitch along the way with a frozen computer screen there. So the phone lines are open right now. What do you think? Doug Ford is apologizing and says he's going to bring in paid sick days. Doug Ford is apologizing, and he says he's going to bring in paid sick days. What do you think? He's promising a paid sick leave program for workers in Ontario, months after saying it wasn't needed. And he says when it comes to some of the measures that were announced on Friday, closing playgrounds, police checks, he says, I'm sorry, we moved too fast. Moved too fast and we got it wrong. So I guess you could say a mea culpa from Premier Ford. What do you think? 750-1310, 750-1310. It's been I have to tell you, it's been a rough 24-hour news cycle for the Premier of Ontario, and that's why this news conference was held this morning. I mean, to give you a taste of the Ontario media machine, well, I mean, you heard some of it there, the question from Colin DeMello from CTV News, my goodness. But the Toronto Star has a story this morning out of its Queen's Park bureau, getting a lot of laughs on social media. Doug Ford doesn't know how to use a laptop. Doug Ford still uses a BlackBerry. And forget whatever else is in the story. That's all people care about in the story. Doug Ford is basically a dummy who doesn't know modern technology. Quote, on Wednesday, Ford's office was scrambling to get him a laptop computer and teach him how to use it. While he has become accustomed to doing remote meetings via Zoom and Microsoft Teams from his office at Queen's Park this year, he has technical support there. Aides say Ford still uses a BlackBerry Classic phone for calls, texts, and emails, but the device is so old that downloading attachments can be challenging. He does not use social media, and his Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts are managed by a communications team. The Premier is so accustomed to the 2014 smartphone, vintage 2014 smartphone, that he has a stack of them and gets refurbished models from a Mississauga electronics shop for about $150 a pop, end quote. So as you can imagine, it's a field day in social media with that one. Doug Ford doesn't know how to use a laptop. What a dummy Doug Ford is. Doesn't know how to use a laptop. Well, how did he become Premier? Well, he was actually elected in a massive majority government. And they called the election 15 minutes after the polls closed. It's interesting that the Toronto Star even has all of that information because Ford has been peeved off for weeks about leaks coming out of Queen's Park. And look, Queen's Park has always been a leaky place. Some of these MPPs, they just can't help themselves. They love whispering things into reporters' ears. It has always been that way. But now the place, is taking on water when stuff like this is getting into the paper. It has to be frustrating to no end for Doug Ford. And there was a recent shakeup in the office. Some heavy-duty comms people have been moved around, and all of a sudden, we know what kind of 7-year-old smartphone Doug Ford uses. Do you think that's just a coincidence? Then you have stuff like this on Twitter from somebody who's a director of news. Ontario Regional News Director, Global News. Quote, Doug Ford will continue to earn a daily salary of $804.73 while in isolation. In other words, what do you take away from that? Doug Ford gets sick days and you don't get sick days, and what a big meanie Doug Ford is, right? Now, it is strange because I don't remember any tweets like that from news directors, let alone journalists and reporters, about Justin Trudeau. When Justin Trudeau was in isolation at Rideau Cottage, when Justin Trudeau was doing his 11:30 daily shtick from Rideau Cottage, couldn't you say the same thing about Mr. Trudeau's salary is $365,000 a year, so it's pretty easy math. Justin Trudeau makes $1,000 a day, and isn't he worth every penny? Justin Trudeau makes more money every day than Doug Ford when the two of them are in isolation. John Ibbotson at the Globe and Mail suggests Doug Ford, if he doesn't get it together soon, this will become his Walkerton. Third wave of the virus will be his Walkerton, the deadly tainted water scandal that ended the political career of Mike Harris and sent the PCs to the opposition side of the legislature for 15 years. And then Andrea Horwath, we have that audio, Dave? Andrea Horwath, particularly harsh yesterday.
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know how you regain trust from that. The Premier's got blood on his hands. I know it's a harsh thing to say, but that's exactly what's happening in our province, and I take no pleasure in saying it.
Doug Ford has blood on his hands. What do you think? Is that fair comment? Let me put that to you. Is that fair comment? Doug Ford has blood on his hands. And then you have this never-ending obsession over paid sick days. Paid sick days. All would be right with this pandemic if only we had paid sick days in Ontario. An Ontario media obsession fueled by an effective political opposition. They've been pounding away on this issue for weeks, if not months now. Paid sick days, paid sick days, paid sick days. Right? And now, after taking the political beating, watching a very solid lead in the polls vanish, now they're going to scramble and come up with their own program. Meantime, there's Mr. Trudeau, launches a deeply flawed, totally inadequate paid sick day program that could have been replicated all across the country. Okay? But it's Doug Ford taking all the heat. And when it comes to premiers, really only Doug Ford. Right? How many other provinces offer paid sick days? Of the 10 provinces. How many of them even have a paid sick day program? You know how many? 2. Quebec and Prince Edward Island. In Quebec, workers are entitled in Quebec to 2 paid sick days a year if they've been on the job more than 3 months. In PEI, it is a whopping 1 paid sick day per year after 5 years of employment. After 5 years. And you know, the only in-depth investigative reporting into that whole paid sick day issue it was done by Chatelaine magazine in January of this year. Well, it's a pretty sad state of affairs when the political media can't seem to match the depth of Canada's leading fashion magazine. Andrew Furey's the Premier of Newfoundland. He's a Liberal. Is he getting pounded every day over his government's failure to offer paid sick days? What about Ian Rankin in Nova Scotia? Liberal. Where are the headlines about how cruel and heartless he is? Or John Horgan in BC, the leading left-winger of the Dominion. The only way a worker can qualify for paid sick days in BC is if they're fleeing domestic violence, and that only came into effect last month, for crying out loud. And it really, on paid sick days, isn't this the serious question that you need to ask? Do we need every one of the provinces to now come up with their own paid sick day program because of the pandemic? Or would it not have been more efficient, say a year ago, to have one program run by the federal government that any Canadian worker, no matter where they live in the country, could access, that offers at least a replacement living wage, that has the money deposited into the bank account in a timely fashion, and that the business in question is made whole in its payroll through an expedited rebate program? Wouldn't that have been made more sense instead of reinventing the wheel 10 times over? $750-1310 on all of that stuff and more. We'll get your reaction. I'm sorry it took so late to get to calls today. It's all Doug Ford's fault. Ann, Ottawa. Good morning, Ann.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
I was grudging you talking, but as usual, you said a lot of important things. I am irate the way that Doug Ford is being dumped on. Yes, he's made some mistakes, but he has said something you're never going to hear from Justin Trudeau. I'm sorry. We got it wrong. I mean, if this doesn't show an out-and-out bias in most of our media, I don't know what does. Because here you go. I mean, if anyone has blood on their hands, it's Justin Trudeau, not Doug Ford. If we had, could you imagine if we had vaccines and most people were vaccinated by the end of January, how many people would have not died? I mean, it's out and out ridicule. It's stupid. I'm listening to it, and I don't know, John Moore, all of these Laurentian elite liberals, right? This morning, he's laughing and hooting all about how stupid Doug Ford is with technology, and I thought, that is such an unfair comment. Like, pick on the guy, the way the guy's leading. But do not pick on that. That snobbery, I despise that more than anything, and most liberals are out-and-out snobs.
Okay. All right, Ann, thank you.
Okay,
thank you.
bye.
Yep, bye-bye. Okay. Sam in Canada. Sam, good morning. Morning, Sam. Morning, Sam. 1, 2, 3. Sam. No. Okay, let's try this one. Sarah, Ottawa. Sarah, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Hi,
I'm right
Sarah.
along there with Ann.
Okay.
She said it very well. Those media people are really nasty.
They're tough on him, aren't they?
Oh, they're just mean.
Every bit as tough on Doug Ford as they are on Mr. Trudeau, right?
Oh, well, I'm not getting into all that, but I just had to call when I heard just the words coming out of their mouth, and maybe they should get off their technology a little bit and get down to their humanity.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, Doug Ford promising paid sick days in Ontario and apologizing for some of the measures introduced on Friday, closing playgrounds, random street checks, and the like. Joey in the West End. Joey.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, Joey. How are you?
Oh, my gosh. I never call. I'm not a politician. I don't pay attention to this crap, but I am just beside myself with this whole bashing Ford thing.
Okay.
Just beside myself.
You think we're too tough on him? Too tough on him?
Very, very too tough on him. Yep, terrible.
Okay.
They should be bashing Trudeau. But, hey, you know what? He dropped the ball many times with the vaccine. He dropped it number of times. Hey, but don't bug him. He's got nice hair.
Okay. All right, Joey. Thank you for your call. Well, we'll be right back. 10:45. This is the Talkback Hour, a Rob Snow Show on City News.
We just took over this business about a few weeks prior to the pandemic, but we've been loving the community, the people, very friendly, but it's been very difficult starting up a new business, just the time that we did, but I'm sure it's the same everywhere. We did take a broken business, which doesn't help us, but we thought we believe in what we do. We're very passionate about food, and we just really wanted to share the Iraqi culture through our food. All our recipes are homemade, so this is very unique. Usually you hear restaurants, shops, it's all frozen food or prepared food. So nothing here is prepared, everything is homemade. We get our meat and produce from a local farm. So supporting local is the way to go. We are supporting all the way. And our meat are actually marinated the day of, so it's as fresh as can be. Quality ingredients and everything is made from scratch. I get a lot of people when they come in, they say it tastes like Middle Eastern, like back home. So for you to have been to Iraq and had the food there, you can really like compare and see the similarity. We do like to focus on healthy. So our recipes, not only the homemade, again, everything is from scratch, but we have like from combos and to like small sandwiches. One of our favorites and very popular is the chicken salad and the beef salad. So now you're getting all the protein and all these amazing ingredients that we all need. During this time, I find a lot of people are sitting at home and not enough movement. So to come here and get something healthy other than go elsewhere and just put, what's not so good for our bodies, makes a huge difference. So we have shawarma sandwiches, combos. I mean, if you're looking for a meal to feed your family, I would highly recommend the family platter. It comes literally with everything, with potatoes, with rice, with chicken, with beef, and we don't charge extra for mix. I know a lot of places do. Here we just add everything to your platter. And lots of healthy choices for sure. We're very passionate about food, and for our small family business, it's been good. Like I said, it's a little struggle, but we are not a chained restaurant.
It's time to talk back.
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
It's true there were paid sick days in Ontario, and it's true Doug Ford took them away. There used to be 2 paid sick days in Ontario. It was under legislation passed by the Wynne government in its dying days in an attempt to secure NDP votes in an upcoming election campaign. But the problem was those 2 days were all wrapped up in a massive labor reform bill. And you know who the biggest opponents to Kathleen Wynne's labor reform bill were? You know who the opponents were having to do with those 2 paid sick days and overtime and on-call and equal pay for equal time? I know this issue inside and out, okay? I was on the radio when this bill was going through the House. You remember we were talking about the minimum wage and $15 an hour. I covered the whole thing. You know who the loudest critics of that legislation were? It wasn't the CFIB and Dan Kelly and those people. It was organized labor, the big unions. They all cried foul because they didn't want the government passing any kind of labor reform, especially when it came to equal pay for equal work. Any kind of labor reform that threatened union seniority and collective bargaining. You think they wanted a part-time worker coming in and making the same money as a guy who's been working on the line for 30 years? No, they did not. And the other most vocal opponents were municipalities who lobbied hard for changes to Kathleen Wynne's bill, that included the 2 paid sick days. Because municipalities, why? They employ a lot of union workers, first of all, and a lot of young part-time workers, lifeguards, these kinds of things, parks and recreation, and a lot of workers who are on call. Mayors, city councils, and their federations of municipalities, big opponents to those labor reforms. And then Doug Ford came in, won the election. His government got rid of the entire act, did away with all of the nonsense, and the 2 paid sick days. Now, I actually said they should keep the 2 paid sick days and throw everything else out. The baby, the bathwater, the bathtub, the rubber duckies, everything else. But man, tough 24 hours for Doug Ford, and you can see it on his face. He looks tired. The media machine is working overtime. He's a dummy, doesn't know how to use a laptop. He makes $800 a day working from home. He has blood on his hands. He's lost the moral authority to govern. Why isn't he doing what, let's see, 7 other premiers, including 3 left-wing premiers, aren't doing, giving workers paid sick days? He should resign. Geez, he should resign at this point. Why would he even want the job at this point? Jordan Greeley. Jordan, good morning.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
Good, sir. Thank you.
I appreciate your perspective on this. I mean, let me say, first off, Friday, I was frustrated with Ford. I didn't like the lockdown seemed extreme to me, but after listening to that press conference and hearing him apologize and seeing the emotion and seeing the attacks, like the questions coming in from the media were like, I didn't learn anything. It just seemed like they were frothing at the mouth some of this stuff and repeating some of the attacks from the opposition. I don't know what they hope to get out of it, but to me, I have sympathy for Ford now.
Well, I sometimes,
Sorry.
It's important, I think, if you're going to be a straight as an arrow reporter, to make sure when you're questioning somebody that you sound like a straight as an arrow reporter and not sounding like an opposition MPP.
No, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And a little hard at times, kind of hard to distinguish one from the other this morning.
It is for sure. I thought we were better than that. It sounds like it reminded me of some of the White House press conferences we saw in the States. And, criticism, you need to criticize, but it has to be measured. I mean, some of those questions, I don't want to name them by name, but it's over the top. And to me, what's rich is to see the same people who are pushing lockdown, Australia, whatever else, COVID zero, this and that, to now it's like you lock down too hard. Like, I don't see, to me, Ford did kind of what the science, like Randall said earlier, kind of what the science table was telling him and what these experts were saying.
Yeah, with the only exception of the paid sick days, which he says are on the way. And I guess now we're going to have 10 brand new sick day programs. Right? When Mr. Trudeau could have designed one that could have been accessed by every Canadian no matter where they lived. Exactly. There is a program, the sickness recovery benefit. The problem is it barely pays anything and it takes you weeks to get your money. What good is that kind of program?
I don't get it. Yeah. Sorry, can I ask one more question?
Sure thing, yeah.
I'd like to see, I wonder if there's a study on how many of the businesses offer sick leave now. To me, it seems like a lot of them are opening it up and we're offering kind of temporary sick leave, and how that has impacted COVID spread.
Well, I mean, the fact is a lot of businesses, I mean, if you're sick, they're begging you to stay home. They don't want you in their building if you're sick.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Okay, Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay. Gord. Good morning, Gord.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah.
First-time caller.
Thank you for calling, sir. Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm so glad that you did your little comment on the media today, because that definitely had to be said. The questions, particularly from Colin DeMello, I mean, that's just not good journalism. That's attack journalism. Rob, what I wanted to mention today is, regardless of what you think about the Liberals or how much you dislike them, you got to admit that the person who's behind the curtain pulling the strings is a strategic mastermind. And I think this past week has been an orchestrated takedown of Doug Ford. And if you go back about a week, the Liberals shut down the committee looking into sexual misconduct in the military. Mm-hmm. And did they pay any political price for that? No, hardly. It was in the news for a couple of days, and that was it.
Yeah, the one-day wonder, right?
Yeah, exactly. So now that that's taken care of, let's set our attention to the problem with vaccines. What do we do about that? Well, let's have our old friend Gerald Butts put out a tweet saying there are millions of vaccines in freezers in Ontario. So that gets the ball rolling. And then Evan Solomon does a show on the myth of vaccine shortages. So on Twitter, anyway, it's a rampant ball rolling against Rob Ford.
Doug Ford.
I'm sorry. I make the same mistake everybody makes. So then Trudeau rides into town with his rescue party.
Trudeau to the rescue. Trudeau to the rescue.
More frontline workers for Ontario.
Yeah. Where are they coming from? Where are they coming? They have a warehouse. Are they taking them out of the Diefenbunker? Where are these?
Where have they been all along?
Where have they been all along? Right? Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have the Red Cross mobile vaccination clinics on standby. What do you mean on standby? We could. What are they on standby for? We could kind of use them right now, right? Yeah. Okay. Look, I want to fit in a few more calls here, Gord. We're a little late, and I want to fit in some calls because of that news conference that we covered. But I appreciate your call. You make some good points. Dave. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good, sir. Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
I just want to say it's a darn shame, we finally got a premier in there that, tries to, he's doing the best he can. I don't think Green Bills could do a better job.
Right.
And for them to rake him over the coals like that, that's a sad day for the media, in my opinion, my press. Like, that was uncalled for, that, some of them questions that were asked.
Okay. A lot of people have a problem with some of the questions that were asked. Okay. All right. Interesting. Yep. Yep.
Okay, and thanks a lot. I enjoy listening to you.
Okay,
yeah. Program.
Yeah. I think the one. Look, obviously, the one that stands out. Let's play this. I think it's a follow-up question, right, from the CTV reporter. First question, the one where he goes on about, well, you're the government that brought us the death and the destruction and all of that. Okay. Have you lost the moral authority to govern? Yeah. Go ahead. Roll that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Premier. You recently said at a news conference that you do not mislead the public. The NDP, though, says that you actually let us off the cliff. They say we are now in free fall, and they say that you have blood on your hands. Premier, why should people trust you to lead us out of the third wave when your government is responsible for bringing us into the third wave and all of the death, destruction, and devastation that has come along with it?
Wow. Your government is responsible. Okay. Let's take one more call. We'll take one more. Okay. All right. That's an interesting way to frame a question. But the NDP says. Okay, well, the NDP says a lot of things. Keith, Shawville. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, if there was an example of how left the press is in this country, that was a perfect example today. I just can't believe blaming him for the third wave is incredible. But I got to commend Ford for keeping us cool. Like, if that had been me, man, I would have been so upset with those questions. But I just can't believe the coolness that man showed today with those ignorant questions.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, Keith. Thank you. Gonna run. I know we didn't take as many calls as we usually do during our talkback hour, but it's not very often. There's a morning news conference from the Premier, so we wanted to bring that to you. This is the Rob Snow Show. Again, talkback hour tomorrow is a Friday free for all, so whatever you want to get into, we'll get into it. This is City News.
City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, April 22nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, -1 degree. In Smiths Falls, it's 0. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. A dip below 4,000 cases of COVID-19 in Ontario today. 3,682, the number of new cases, along with 40 more deaths. New cases come from testing of just over 54,000. Locally, 279 cases in Ottawa, 64 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. There are 10 more cases in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and Renfrew is up by 12. The provincial government is working on a sick leave benefit for people affected by COVID.
We're now working on our own solution to fill those gaps for everyone in Ontario.
Now, Premier Doug Ford announcing a program in development will bridge the gap that some workers experience now between taking time off and when a federal government program kicks in. Ford makes one promise, but with no details.
We'll come up with this program, and again, it will be the best program in North America. We're working on solutions as we talk right now.
The Premier also got emotional during a media briefing this morning, apologizing for mistakes his government had made during the pandemic. Conservative leader federally, Erin O'Toole, is calling on the government to act swiftly in restricting flights arriving from India and other COVID-19 variant hotspots. O'Toole says the government has a narrow window to prevent the new variants from sweeping right across the country.
The federal government must temporarily suspend flights from hotspot countries immediately. This will buy us time to develop a clear set of parameters for identifying the risks of emerging variants and sharing this information clearly with Canadians.
Now, a case involving the variant of interest that originated in India was detected in Quebec yesterday. India saw more than 314,000 cases of COVID-19 just in the last 24 hours. That included 2,100 deaths. City News time 11:03, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
It's a mainly cloudy, windy day for Ottawa, the Valley, and Smiths Falls. The wind out of the west-northwest will climb to 7 for the high today. Continuing windy tonight, partly cloudy and +1, and tomorrow sun and cloud and 15. For today, the high 7.
And right now in Ottawa, -1 degree, it's 0 in Smiths Falls. During one of the provincial border checkpoints, police stopped an impaired driver at 7:50 in the morning. OPP say the checkpoint on the 417 resulted in several charges Tuesday against a 27-year-old Montreal man. Charges include impaired by alcohol and drugs, driving with pot readily available. Maxime Levesque has a court date now to answer those charges in May. 3 missing people to tell you about today. Full details on our website, ottawa.citynews.ca. One involves a missing Smiths Falls man who was actually located but then went missing again. Smiths Falls police assured by the OPP they had 23-year-old Blake Horn stopped in Chesterville last night. Smiths Falls police told he was found, but before they could assess him, he fled police. Police and Blake's family are concerned for his safety. He is traveling with a border collie and could be in a gray 2005 Acura. Gatineau police have reissued an appeal to help finding a missing teen. This is 17-year-old Madison Teal. She has not been seen since January 23rd, about 6:30 in the evening, and police believe she could be in Ontario. And also a missing 13-year-old in Ottawa. The police service looking for help locating Makunde Wadani. He was last seen leaving his house in Vanier yesterday afternoon at about 3:30. Police do not have a description of the clothing he was wearing, but again, go to the website for information on all 3. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM
and 1310 AM.
Let's talk about the ban on golf. Ontario is the only place you can't play golf in all of North America because of the new restrictions, because of COVID-19. Mike Kelly is here. He's the Executive Director of the Golf Association of Ontario. Good morning, Mr. Kelly.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
How shocking was it when the news came down that golf courses would be closed?
Yeah, it's shocking, frustrated, lots of words, and that came to mind when that came down. It's being the golf industry, have been working, for over a year, and most recently, trying to continue to keep golf on top of the mind of government in terms of the role that we've played in keeping, Ontarians safe and recreational activity. And, so we really have been proactive. So it was disappointing and frustrating to see that announcement, come, because, like I said, we really feel, and we proved that we, over 2020, especially with the demand in golf right now, which is just great to see, that, there was no known cases of COVID transmission at golf courses. So it's just incredibly tough to make sense of.
Now, what sort of investments have golf course owners, operators, what have they put into the courses themselves in order to make them as safe as possible from COVID-19? Give us a sense of what's been done in the industry.
I was thinking about that golf experience and how we've pivoted the golf experience to ensure that we keep people safe. So, you think about your normal golf experience pre-COVID and you walk in, go in the pro shop, book a tee time, pay for your golf balls, whatever it is. And now there is none of that. You pay online, but just before golf courses were shuttered. The clubhouses were closed, so everything's done online. Flag sticks are removed. Sanitation is available readily. There was dividers put in golf carts. There was any touch points that were there, rakes and bunkers. All of those things were removed, and it was easy for us to ensure that we kept people safe. And it was also, most golf courses right out of the gates also, had, 20 minutes, no more than 20 minutes you'd arrive. So you'd wait in the parking lot. Just everything was controlled extremely well. The protocols were rock solid. And we had complete buy-in to that. So every golf course was bought into that. Some were, we even went further than that, but, but we all committed as an industry to doing to keeping people safe, and executed it, extremely well, last season.
You're the executive director, Mr. Kelly, of the Golf Association of Ontario, right? Not the Golf Course Association of Ontario.
No, so there are actually, we're a Golf Ontario.
Golf Ontario, right?
Golf Ontario, yeah. And then
so this is what I want to get at. There's a lot more to the industry of golf than the golf course itself, right?
Yeah.
You've got, I think about instruction is big. Golf lessons, right? Golf ranges, golf equipment is big. Give us a golf tourism, of course, and resorts and everything else. Give us a sense of what this is as an industry.
Yeah, it's big. In Ontario, we're talking a GDP of just over $3 billion. 800 facilities, 110,000 workers, 1.8 million golfers. That's significant. And you think about the different associations that are part of the We Are Golf Group, which is our industry group that has been, on this for over a year. And that includes, to your point, the instructors. That's the PGA of Ontario. You've got the Golf Course Owners Association that represent that, the superintendents, the general managers, and we are, the provincial sport organization for golf in Golf Ontario. So it's a big animal. You talk about tourism. I know Ottawa is such a hotbed for golf.
Oh yeah.
Just an awesome group of passionate golfers and enthusiasts in that region. It's big, and it's one of the highest, if not the most, participated sport in the province and country.
And it was enjoying a comeback, actually. COVID, sadly, was actually good for golf, right?
Most operators would tell you, whether it's membership or rounds played, are up anywhere between 20 and 30%.
Because I'm come from a long, long line of really bad golfers, Mr. Kelly. So, and I still follow the sport with great enthusiasm and follow the industry with great interest. The fact is that golf was in decline for a little bit. The Tiger effect had kind of worn off. A lot of golf courses were for sale. There was a shift, I think, in the industry because a lot of people don't have time to commit, 4 or 5 hours to play 18 holes, 9-hole courses, par threes. We're making a comeback. Then all of a sudden this happens, and then people kind of fall in love with the game all over again. Here's a chance to escape, right?
It's and we. And it was an opportunity for us to really try to ensure that golf experience, was something that retained them as well, right? I mean, there was an opportunity because there was not a whole lot out there to go out and enjoy yourself in the fresh air, and so people tried the game or came back to the sport. And a lot of the protocols I talked about earlier, and I think I said we removed flag sticks. Actually, they couldn't be removed, and it just made for a fun and really experience that people could fall in love with again. And we introduced programs like Youth on Course where kids could play for just $5. A partnership with the LPGA for women in the game. So that's also part of the frustrating part of it. We really pivoted quickly to try to provide programs and pathways for families and kids and women and girls to fall in love and stay in love with the game. And so this is a small bump in the road. We're going to get by. This golf courses will be open hopefully very soon, and we'll continue to see people playing the game in record numbers.
Well, I mean, it's very reminiscent of the whole decision around downhill skiing, and ski hills were closed in Ontario. But we know, for example, here in the National Capital Region, we know that people who really like to downhill ski in this area, they just went to Quebec and they downhill skied. And I'm sure that's probably the same, Mr. Kelly, with golf. Lots of golf courses in Quebec.
Yes, there is. And, to your point earlier, I'm sure everyone saw the social media image of golf in Ontario being the only jurisdiction in North America where golf was not allowed. There's golf courses, great golf courses, with our friends in Quebec, and golfers will, I'm sure, explore any opportunity to play the sport. And it was unfortunate what happened in downhill skiing. Me and my family took it up for the first time, and it's unfortunate. I think the benefit golf has, right, is not necessarily in every single community, but in Ontario, 800 facilities, small, large, in scale, and there's almost a golf course nearby everybody, and I think that's a benefit to golf and getting people outside.
Yes, most certainly. So you said it's a $3 billion industry in Ontario.
Yeah.
Employing how many people did you say, Mr.
100,000-ish. Yeah.
About 100,000
workers.
Yeah. Wow, holy smokes. And I think about all the supplies and all the economic spin-off effects there. You need you buy equipment, and you buy everything to do with landscaping and all the supplies, food and everything else that goes into the local golf course. I mean, it could have a huge spin-off effect here too. This one decision.
I was saying this to another show I was on yesterday morning, and I drive by this golf course, and drive by just grab a coffee, and I come back to my place, and you see that the gates are up. But take a look at that golf course, which is a public golf course.
Right.
They would have had. I just talked to the owner, and so they've got to lay off just less than 100 seasonal employees, and return. Get this. Just less than $400,000 in green fees between now and for let's just say for the next few weeks. That's substantial. And for those seasonal employees, most of them work outside too. Yeah. So it's it's really tough. And
probably a lot of young people too, I would suspect.
A ton of young people that are involved in getting jobs, and I think that's probably a stat I'm not even sure what that is, but the number of people that are young people that are getting jobs at golf courses because they're able to operate, outside of the last call week, so it's having a positive effect. I believe that, and and it's proven. And I honestly, probably the thing I frustrated most is just how well the industry pivoted, how everybody aligned together. All these industries that we just talked about working together to ensure that we provided a safe place to play and especially for mental health. That's probably the most frustrating part.
Okay. So give us a sense, what's happening behind the scenes? I mean, is there lobbying happening, discussions going on?
Oh, you bet.
Yeah.
There is all of the above. But we are golf group I told you about that we have been working around the clock here, just working with medical officers of health, sending letters to them, sending letters to the government, doing everything we possibly can, to try to ensure that we can open ASAP. And there's no doubt that golf is safe. It's been proven, and we know that our protocols are extremely solid. So it's I'm always the most optimistic person in the room. So,
right.
But I also know that I feel like that golf courses will be open again soon, and we're doing everything we can to make that happen.
Okay. Well, it snowed here in Ottawa today. Did it snow in Muskoka today?
Yeah, there's a little bit of flurries here.
Yeah, that's a little tough on the greens. So would have been a lost day anyway. But hopefully you'll get. Hopefully you'll have a season. And
we will. We will.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for your time today. So
you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. Yep. From Golf Ontario, the executive director, Mike Kelly. CFL will start later, August 5th. They hope the CFL will get going, Ottawa Red Blacks, and the Grey Cup in December. But what has to happen between now and then? Arash Madani will join us from Sportsnet. This is City News.
It's such a beautiful feel because it's all natural. I'm able to talk to a lot of people who are going through different journeys of health where they really don't know where to start, where to begin. And I'm happy and grateful to have all this knowledge where I can actually help them and guide them. So, of course, medications have a great place in our system, but even so do natural therapies, which have been around for centuries and centuries. Like, old time, ancient times, everything, herbs grew, everything was done with nature, all healing was done with nature. So I'm totally in love with all the elements with nature. In our beautiful village of Manotick, the Manotick Natural Market, you can find tremendous different things. So we have herbs, we have vitamins, we have natural body care, we do infrared sauna therapy, nutrition counseling, acupuncture, Bowen therapy, energy healing. So we're like a wellness hub along with being a full health food store. We are 1 year into pandemic since it started last year in March. It was a shock. Usually I see things coming, and I definitely did not see that coming. Golden Root is a product that I created 4 years ago, actually for my kids, just for immune system, overall health. And it just took off with certain friends of mine who had cancer or some severe issues, and they started finding that it was really helping them from different tests they had done with their doctor. And I knew I had something really special. So then I went through the proper procedure of being able to sell it. So it's actually, I'm not allowed to make it anymore in my house 4 years ago, and it is made in a Health Canada approved lab, and then it comes to me. And what Golden Root is a formulation of turmeric, ginger, lavender, oregano, and black pepper, all food grade, which is the most bioavailable turmeric in the market right now for pain, inflammation, digestion, immune system, concussion, liver health, and brain health. So, and it tastes like salad dressing. We do a lot of in-house, so we make our in-house concoctions of teas. You can come here, tell us what your health issues are, and we can blend it right there. And there's some that are already prepared beforehand for sleeping, for anxiety, for different things. And in that bar, we basically make cold brew teas and cold brew nitrogen coffee. And again, it's all local. Everything we do is local, and as many herbs we can find locally as well. If a client can't come out, we'll go out our way to deliver it. And you're getting that personal touch when you come in. If you have an issue, we will listen. and help you. We're very, very active in the community, so we would like the same thing back for the community to come to.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
The CFL has a plan. Opening day, CFL season. How does this sound? 2021, August 5th. And then the date for the Grey Cup to be held in Hamilton would be the 12th of December. But what has to be in place for any of that to happen? Arash Madani is here from Sportsnet. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, it's great to hear from you. What has to happen? What's the plan here from the CFL?
Well, it's a plan, I guess. It's also a hope. Hope that this is all going to unfold. Rob, what I've been told is, yes, August 5th is what they've announced as what they hope to be opening day, which would mean training camps would start the second week of July, which would mean that players would have to start coming in, especially the Americans, with the hope that they're all going to be fully vaccinated by late June to begin their quarantine for training camp. But they still need approval from the provincial government in Ontario, where there are 3 franchises. They still need their return-to-play program approved in Quebec, where the Montreal Alouettes are, and to have people in the seats. These are all hopes that they have. Now, look, this isn't an announcement. We're hoping this is going to happen, but they're going to come back to the table in mid-June to provide an update. And we'll know a lot more in mid-June whether or not this is actually going to happen. But until then, there are a lot of hopes that things are going to transpire well in the next 100 days.
So if it's a plan, it's written in pencil and not ink.
Correct.
Right now, Arash.
Which to be fair,
yes,
I think everything in COVID is, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, so the idea that the CFL could have a bubble and, maybe just kind of pick, say, an Eastern Canadian stadium and a Western Canadian stadium, maybe have a bubble, not happening. Because that's not viable for the CFL, as I understand it. Is that right, Arash Madani?
Yeah, they are a box office league, Rob. I mean, where the CFL makes its money is by having people in the seats, by selling tickets 2 by 2. Now, what I am told is, should Ontario and Quebec Health not approve this plan on the return to play right away for early August, the East Division teams may open their season out west. They could start on the road playing Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, where it has been approved. Rob, we could very well also be talking about a season that is not 14 games and won't start August 5th, but could be 12 games or 10 games or 9 games. We still don't definitively know any of this, but the bubble is not on the table. It was for last season if they were to get a big check from the federal government that didn't come. The Fed still provided each team, Winnipeg's books are public, the Feds provided Winnipeg more than $3 million in wage subsidy and other government funding programs, but they didn't just write a check for the bubble to happen. So the bubble is off the table for 2021, although that was their hope for 2020.
And it was recently reported that the league, you correct me if I'm wrong, Arash Madani, the league had been seeking some kind of interest-free loan, and that was refused by the government. Is that right?
Yeah, and they didn't expect that they were
didn't
going
expect
to get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is about, Rob, this is a league whose business model centers on having people in the seats. And they're not going to have a sellout crowd in Winnipeg, even though the provincial government has allowed fans to return. They've done different modeling on the prairies for, a third capacity, half capacity, 2/3 capacity, depending on what they're going to be allowed to have come summer. A lot of this is just based on guessing of what kind of capacity you can have there, and then ultimately hoping that you're actually going to sell that many tickets.
Right. Okay.
So that's part of this too.
And what departments are in the government are responsible for, given the yays and the nays? I suppose in Ontario, again, it must be Lisa McLeod.
Lisa McLeod basically came out a week or two ago and said, we are not even in a position to sit down with the CFL right now. No, Rome is burning right now.
Right.
They just canceled the OHL season a few days ago. So, effectively what McLeod is saying is, let's kick this down the road. We'll get to it eventually. It's just not now. So while the league has announced an August 5th start, there's no schedule yet. I suspect that we're going to know a lot more in mid-June, because by then they're going to need provincial health authorities to determine what's next.
Right. And I mean, we just had, a 35-minute news conference from the premier with apologies and tough questions about the situation here, and measures brought in and measures reversed. And, let's face it, Arash Madani, there weren't any questions about when kickoff is for the Canadian Football League. And, the Fords, I mean, the big football fans too. So.
And Rob, let's remember that the federal government plays a big part in this, because ultimately the border is their cross to bear.
Right.
We're talking about half of the league, the personnel in the league are Americans and globals. It's ridiculous, Randy Ambrosi program. But half of the players in the league are coming from other countries. So the quarantine plays a part in all of this too. And CFL teams that have had next to no revenue for the last 18 or so months are going to have to put their players and some of their coaches up in a hotel for 10 days, 14 days before they even step on the field for training camp.
Right.
So that, there's a cost to all of this as well.
Okay. Thank you, Arash Madani, for the details this morning. Greatly appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Yep. Sportsnet reporter Arash Madani. So coming up, the CEO for the March of Dimes Canada, Leonard Baker, will join us. Very interesting history, the March of Dimes. When you read about it, there was a lengthy piece in one of the papers this week about the history behind the March of Dimes. It's like history is repeating itself here. And as well, why are so many pregnant women in intensive care units across Ontario? We'll explore that as well coming up next. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, the 22nd of April. Good morning. I'm Sarah Buchan. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, partly cloudy skies and +1, a little breezy as well. Here's what's making news right now. Premier Doug Ford promising a paid sick leave program for Ontario workers after months of saying a provincial policy was not required. He says people forced into quarantine should not have to worry about their jobs or income. He says the province is now working on a solution because the federal government has not expanded its own policy. An emotional premier also apologized for increasing police enforcement powers and closing playgrounds last Friday. He says his government moved too fast and got it wrong. Ottawa Public Health confirms 2 deaths and 281 new cases of COVID-19 out of 3,682 new cases across Ontario. 40 more Ontarians have died due to COVID-19. 7,829 people in this province over the course of the pandemic. Hospitalizations, ICU admissions, and the number of patients on ventilators are all up across the province. Elsewhere locally, Public Health Ontario reports 64 new cases in Eastern Ontario and 12 in Renfrew County. Leeds Grenville Lanark Health Unit confirms 11 new cases, 8 of those in the past 24 hours. Quebec Premier François Legault says a number of premiers are urging the Prime Minister to bring in tougher quarantine rules for passengers on international flights and people driving into Canada. Elsewhere, Nova Scotia closed its provincial boundary today to non-essential travel from all parts of Canada except Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland and Labrador, as it is dealing with a spike in COVID-19 cases. I'm Sarah Buchan. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is on the front page of the paper this morning. Elizabeth Payne reports, in some intensive care units in Toronto, pregnant women now represent half or more of the critically ill COVID-19 patients, a large percentage of them on ventilators. The situation has reached critical levels in recent weeks. Intensive care units in Toronto, pregnant women now represent half or more of the critically ill COVID-19 patients. And we had the director of clinical care at the Ottawa Hospital on the program today. And critical care is the sickest of the sick. The sickest of the sick. Half represented by pregnant women now in some ICUs in at least the Toronto area. It's not right now the situation in Ottawa, but concerning nonetheless. So we're joined right now by Dr. Constance Nasello, President, Ontario Society Obstetricians and Gynaecologists. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Rob.
What is happening here? How to explain this? How do you explain this?
Well, this is something that we have actually been quite fearful of. Okay. The situation in pregnancy is that women are more likely to become infected. And in particular, we do know with viral infections and lung infections, they can end up in the ICU, even with influenza. And the reason that happens is our immune system, when we're pregnant, is actually quite suppressed because our immune system is supposed to identify foreign DNA. Well, a pregnancy is not identical to the mother. So, in fact, it is foreign. So there has to be some major suppression of our immune system in order to carry a pregnancy. And so what's happening now that we're seeing younger people being infected with COVID-19 and ending up in the ICU, pregnant women are also at much higher risk of needing hospitalization and much higher risk than women of the same age of needing to be in an intensive care unit.
Just generally speaking.
In general, yes.
Right.
And so what we're seeing in the Toronto obstetrical units is a massive influx of COVID-19 patients. And such that many of them are ending up in ICUs. The last I heard from Mount Sinai, 9 of their 20 beds were pregnant of their ICU beds.
Wow. Okay. So would you say but would you say then, Doctor, that it was predictable?
We've been predicting this since at least December. You may recall we had a statement out in January calling on the Ontario government to prioritize pregnant women and not to require permission slips in order to get pregnant healthcare workers immunized. And that group has been immunized, but now with the more contagious variants, it's hitting young people now that are not vaccinated, and pregnant women in our practices are not immunized. So this is where this is all coming from. So yesterday, the Society of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists of Canada posted a new statement stating that with the influx of patients into the ICUs, especially in the Toronto area, they are clearly recommending that any of the 4 approved vaccines in Canada are acceptable for use in pregnant women. And even so research is
regardless of age? Regardless of age?
Regardless of age.
Okay, all right.
And there's information showing that the concern that has arisen in the last couple of weeks about the AstraZeneca vaccine is by a totally different mechanism than thrombosis in other conditions. And pregnancy is one of the highest conditions for blood clots. And the risk is far lower than just being pregnant. The Thrombosis Canada put out a little flyer earlier this week stating that 4 in a million people will end up with a thrombosis due to the AstraZeneca vaccine. 4 in 1 million, but the risk is far higher if you take birth control pills, and again, it's exponentially higher when you're pregnant.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So your recommendation would be let's expedite the immunization of pregnant women then, right? Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, we've also clearly said in coordination with all of the obstetrical societies in North America and the UK is that we cannot mandate a conversation or require a permission slip from the healthcare providers of pregnant women, because it's only going to delay access to timely vaccines. And now that the AstraZeneca vaccine is in family doctors' offices and in pharmacies, women should be able to get it and should be comfortable that the risks of COVID-19 to them are far greater than any risks, theoretical or actual risks, of any vaccination.
When
with the exception of live virus ones, there are some that we cannot give in pregnancy, but the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson ones are perfectly acceptable to use, along with the Pfizer and Moderna.
So when a pregnant woman ends up in an intensive care with COVID-19, what is known at this point, doctor, the effect that it has on the fetus?
Well, with respect to the fetus, it doesn't look like the virus crosses the placental barrier, but the risk is more to mom.
Okay.
And particularly if mom has any pre-existing medical conditions or has developed some medical conditions in pregnancy. And I'm hearing anecdotally that some pregnant women are ending up having to be delivered early because they're just deteriorating so quickly. And so that's created a situation where patients that are ventilated and on multiple drugs to try and cover the COVID-19 are actually having to have cesarean sections in the ICU. Not anybody's ideal situation. But once the fetus is out, and there are definite changes in blood flow that occur postpartum that allow women to be easier treated then. And for instance, it's much safer to put them on ECMO once the placenta is out of the way, because almost 50% of our blood flow goes through the placenta during pregnancy.
Okay. And how, I mean, it's called intensive care.
Absolutely.
Right. I'm wondering how much more intensive the care has to be because the woman is pregnant.
Well, there's a higher incidence, somewhere between 1 to 10% of needing to be on a ventilator and needing to be on a ventilator for prolonged periods of time. And we have seen in case reports earlier this year of that hit the news of a pregnant woman in BC that finally was delivered after something like 6 or 7 weeks in the ICU, and mother and baby did well following that. But there was a sad story in Manitoba following that of another pregnant woman that she didn't survive, even though she had a cesarean section, but the baby did. And so babies are ending up being admitted to neonatal intensive care units, mostly for monitoring and prematurity.
Right. And I mean, there's all sorts of stories about, for a lot of people, there's long haul COVID, and it's a long road back for a lot of people. And I could just imagine you're having, you have these long haul symptoms. Now you have a newborn at home. Maybe there's a risk of postpartum depression. I mean, my gosh, it's like a lot to take on for a lot of people. So
you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there, Rob. Because right now in the third wave, I'm seeing in my office everyone feeling depressed and demoralized with this third wave and the fact that we're not out of this yet. And the only way we're going to get out of it is by vaccination. And so we've called on the Ontario Vaccine Task Force and the Ontario Ministry of Health to make pregnant women a priority for vaccination. And certainly the statement from the SOGC yesterday was very helpful in that regard, because most of the time we were thinking we had to wait for Pfizer or Moderna. But with the supply being limited for those, the other vaccines are perfectly acceptable, because the goal is to keep people out of hospital unless they absolutely need to be there. And that's what the vaccination will do.
Now, when the mother is vaccinated, does the immunity pass on to the child?
Well, that's the part of emerging research that we can positively report on. Right. We've seen case reports of women in as little as 3 weeks prior to delivery, the baby having antibodies against COVID-19. So that's antibodies that are passed to baby usually will last anywhere from 6 weeks to 2 months.
Okay.
And so, for our regular vaccines, that starts to provide a window where the baby can be vaccinated. But right now, the babies can't be vaccinated with COVID, so it's the only means of protecting them against acquiring the virus themselves. And we really don't know in newborns what that actually looks like for babies. So far, we haven't seen any really terrible complications of it, and that's probably the protective factor that children seem to have. But they also can be vectors for infection to older family members.
Okay. Doctor, thank you for your time this morning.
Oh, you're
very
welcome,
informative.
Rob. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Dr. Constance Nasello is the president of the Ontario Society of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Everyone's got their own little dreams. I want to write the next novel. I want to write a screenplay, which I still want to do. So owning my own business is something I've always in the back of your mind. Oh yeah, that'd be really cool to try and do. I end up lost my job that I had for 20 years. And I found myself with nothing, trying to figure out what am I going to do now. I'm mid-40s and, I got a lot of different experience, mainly in retail. So I figured, you know what, let's try to give this a go. I didn't really have any money. I started up with the little website. We went with that, and then it's kind of just grown from there. I have such a passion for this, it's not even work for me. This is a hobby that I get to, thankfully make a living off of. When you walk in, you're going to be overwhelmed, I think, with all the amount of licensed product that we have. I only sell licensed product. I don't sell anything no name or anything. Everything is 100% officially licensed, depending on the franchise. So I like to support a lot of different franchises, a lot of pop culture. So I do have a little bit of music, vinyl, Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel, DC, Doctor Who, Game of Thrones, you name it. There's probably something around, or if I don't have it, you let me know and I'll do whatever I can to, try and find it for you. I do some comic books. A lot of the interesting things that I do are items that you just don't find anywhere else. I probably have the best selection of pop culture cookbooks. So cookbooks from Walking Dead and Downton Abbey and Orange is the New Black, Hannibal, Marvel, Wonder Woman. I've got the best selection of Star Trek ships in the city. Well, actually, I've got the best selection in the country. I'm the only retailer in Canada that deals directly with the company Eagle Moss. I've got the best variety of Pop Funko figures within the city. I got the best prices, hands down. Even some of my action figures that I sell that are available at Walmart and Toys R Us, I'm cheaper than them, which is a lot of times you don't realize it. So even that small business can offer you a great value.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Came across this little item in the Globe and Mail this week. That was headline. It was in Wednesday's Globe. We thought polio was a hidden monster waiting to jump out and grab you. For polio survivors, the fight against COVID-19 seems eerily familiar, and it's some sponsored content, and it's about certainly the history of the polio epidemic, the thrill of victory when the Salk vaccine was announced, and the role of the March of Dimes. March of Dimes Canada started in 1951. And Leonard Baker is with me. He's in Newmarket today. He's the president and CEO, March of Dimes Canada. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. Thanks for having me.
It's really nice to hear from you. This was really interesting, and it filled in a lot of blanks for me about the March of Dimes. People may hear that, oh yeah, March of Dimes, Canadian charity. What is the history? How did the March of Dimes start?
We started really in an effort to help eradicate and deal with the issue of polio back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Our organization, as you mentioned at the outset, started in 1951, so we're having our 70th anniversary this year. Our goal was through the support of volunteers and the community to help raise money and awareness about polio so that Jonas Salk would be successful in bringing the solution to what was then a deadly pandemic that was impacting the lives of children and adults across our country. And through our efforts, fortunately, a vaccine was created. And then our organization said, okay, now what do we do? So we decided that our efforts now would be put on supporting polio survivors because we knew they'd have long-term impacts because of the toll that polio took on them, and also pivoted to provide a wealth of services to all people with disabilities, from home-based supports to employment services to technology, We're just proudly launching a new after-stroke program to help stroke survivors in Canada. So we're a name that's well known, Rob, to many.
Yes.
But many, if you ask them, what does March of Dimes Canada do today? I'd say that your listeners know more about us now than probably 90% of the population.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned a lot already. For example, I didn't know until this week about the Marching Mothers. Who were the Marching Mothers?
Yeah, so these, again, because of the toll that polio took on children, these were volunteers that said, we have to help raise money. So, the March for Dimes was really about collecting dimes. And many of us remember in school, we'd have these little cardboard collecting dime collectors that people would gather and bring in money for the March of Dimes to help polio survivors. And back in the day, it was really to help fund the cure. And these were volunteer moms who went door to door and did different fundraisers to raise awareness and to raise money to help eradicate a deadly virus.
I mean, there's a wonderful picture in this item in the Globe and Mail of all these marching mothers kind of parading down this street with their, looks like little fundraising baskets or whatever, and they're going door to door and they're collecting dimes. And it's not, I guess I gather at that time it wasn't just about the vaccine, but it was also, there's another picture here of these terrible iron lungs, which people of a certain vintage will remember being so afraid of that they would end up in one of those things. And the rest of us have only learned about in the history books. But, to support, as you say, survivors, because there was a lot. I mean, the fear of polio was everywhere. Right, it was pervasive in society at the time, was it not, Mr.
Absolutely, It was, and it took so long. If we think about how quickly we brought vaccines to fight COVID-19 to market, it took years and years to find the polio vaccine, and throughout that time, there was all these measures around keeping kids in during the summer. You couldn't go to the parks, to the swimming pool. So much of what we're seeing today is mirrored in the experience from polio. But I think to your point about the iron lungs and the impact that the virus had on individuals, we can't forget that these viruses can take a toll immediately. But as we highlighted in the piece that you're referring to, there was a thing called post-polio syndrome that nobody knew of at the time. But it was like the virus reactivated in people's bodies years later who thought that they were through with polio. So, as we think about how important it is for people to consider getting vaccinated, one of the things we should be keeping in the back of our minds is, what may be the long-term implications. We've heard of long haulers and other people who've had a difficult time with COVID, but we really can't predict what the future may bring when it comes to this virus and its impact on us.
Yeah. Quote, it was like the current pandemic. The movie theaters were shut down. Swimming pools were shut down. We weren't allowed to play in playgrounds. We weren't allowed to play with other people. It's and we're fortunate. I mean, there's a generation who remembers this, and that generation knows what a vaccine can do to help end a pandemic. Many of us didn't live through that, and we don't have an appreciation for what that generation went through, and we don't want to see history repeating itself. And our organization was founded to promote the importance of vaccine to eradicate polio, and today we've launched our Mission Immunity initiative to help raise awareness about how important it is for people with disabilities to have barrier-free access to getting to vaccination sites, and also to address issues around vaccine hesitancy. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about that Mission Immunity. Maybe a little more detail on what that is. Mission Immunity.
Yeah, so this is a public awareness campaign. You can learn more about it by visiting our website at modc.ca or marchofdimescanada.ca. But, we are an organization that supports, more than 6 million Canadians living with a disability. And we know that efforts around educating people about the importance of vaccination needs to be understood and relevant to all of Canadians, including people with disabilities, some of whom may have intellectual or other disabilities. That may mean we have to think about how we're communicating with them, and then also ensuring that the sites that they have available to them or bringing vaccines to them is made available because people with disabilities tend to have in many cases, a greater risk, maybe a compromised immune system or some underlying health issues that may make them more susceptible to the horrible impacts that COVID-19 could have on our lives. So we are really working with governments and health boards to ensure that we have a clear line for people with disabilities to be able to access vaccines.
Well, yeah, and we're starting to. There is a push on now, for example, and it's already happened in other countries when it comes to so-called long-haul COVID to have that recognized as a disability, and that there should be appropriate supports, just as there would be with other types of disabilities, and certainly that's part of the history of your organization, right?
Yes,
yeah.
and to be there, and we pivot to where the needs are, and certainly during the pandemic, the isolation that the pandemic has caused and people having to stay at home has had a profound impact on the mental health of people with disabilities, many of whom were living in a more isolated life because of their disability. We've implemented the use of technology to help connect people in person through platforms like Zoom and Teams and other means, so that they have that opportunity to connect with their peers and participate in programming. And that's been a lifeline for thousands of people in our country during this pandemic.
For people of that vintage who will remember the day that it was announced there was a vaccine for polio, what you learn is that how liberating that was for so many people. How hopeful are you that we kind of recaptured some faith in vaccines as a result of this pandemic, sir?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that, through vaccines, through the measures that we're taking right now to protect ourselves and PPE and keeping our distance, will go a long way to helping keep people safe. But I think at the end of the day, the more people get vaccinated, the greater likelihood we'll come out of this pandemic with some semblance of what used to be our normal lives, and that our country will be, and people with disabilities will be that much safer and be able to get back to participating in daily activities that right now are much more risky for them than many other people.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Nice to talk to you today.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV.